Chapter 1052. Elder Gu was calling for reinforcements. It had to be said that Yi Xian was a little confused because he did not expect Elder Gu to call for reinforcements. Who was he calling for? Sister Shui. Yi Xian shook his head, thinking that it was unlikely. Because Sister Shui had left. He knew that she had really left. If it was not Sister Shui, then there was only one possibility. Elder Gu was calling for someone from the Sword Sect. The Sword Sect. Was this mysterious force finally going to surface? Just when Ren Pingsheng and the others were several dozen feet above Yi Xian's head, the space above the void suddenly split open, and 3 rays of sword light flashed out like lightning. Soon, 3 swordsmen appeared above Yi Xian's head. 3 men. The man in the lead was dressed in white and had a sword at his waist. As soon as he appeared, he did not waste any time and immediately drew his sword. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw this posture. Sword drawing technique. The sword technique that the man in white displayed was the sword drawing technique, the same sword technique that the man in green had taught him all those years ago. The moment the man in white unsheathed his sword, buzz. The sound of the sword rose into the sky and pierced through the clouds. Boom. The Emperor of Diabolism who was at the forefront was pushed back thousands of meters by the sword, and at almost the same time, Saint Tianhua was also pushed back by a ray of sword light. Not only that, but at the moment when the two of them were pushed back, a ray of sword light suddenly shot into the sky. In an instant, dozens of bloody heads shot into the sky, and the entire sky was sprayed with blood like a fountain. Saint Tianhua and the Taoist Demon Emperor were dumbfounded when they saw that. Instant kill? In just a breath's time, dozens of super experts from both clans had fallen. Just this one attack alone could be said to be a great blow to both clans. Not only were Saint Tianhua and Demon Emperor Daola stunned, but all the experts present were also stunned. Including Yi Xian below. The 3 swordsmen who had just appeared were stronger than Elder Gu. Why did the Sword Sect have so many super experts? In the distant horizon, Xiao Dao glanced at the 3 swordsmen. No one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, Elder Gu walked in front of the 3 swordsmen and bowed slightly. Senior Brother Lu, Senior Brother Li, Senior Brother Chen. The leading man in white smiled. I trust you've been well since we last met. Is the young lady well? Old Gu said, young miss has left. The man in white frowned. Leave? Is she in danger? Old man Gu shook his head. It's not that miss is in danger, but, as he spoke, he turned to look at Yi Xian, who was not far away. Seeing this, the 3 men in white turned to look at Yi Xian. When they saw Yi Xian, the 3 of them were stunned. At this moment, the white-robed man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and grabbed Yi Xian's right hand. Before Yi Xian could react, a drop of blood essence shot out from the white-robed man's fingertip. The drop of blood essence floated in the air, red like fire. A short while later, the 3 of them had a strange look in their eyes. The white-robed man turned to look at Elder Gu. Elder Gu nodded. When the 3 of them saw this, their expressions softened when they looked at Yi Xian. The white-robed man smiled. Your sword Dao has entered the mortal realm? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. The white-robed man smiled. Not bad. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned to look at the sky. The Taoist Demon Emperor looked at the white-robed man with a solemn expression. Who are you? The white-robed man smiled. You don't need to know who I am. All you need to know is that those who offend the Sword Sect will be killed no matter how far they are. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly shot into the sky. Seeing this scene, the Taoist Demon Emperor's expression changed drastically. He suddenly roared with rage, heavenly demon physique. As soon as he finished speaking, a giant heavenly demon statue that was thousands of zhang longs suddenly appeared behind him. As soon as the giant heavenly demon statue appeared, the heavens and the earth suddenly darkened. The giant heavenly demon statue's eyes were like blood as an invisible pressure swept across the heavens and the earth. At this moment, everyone felt like doomsday had arrived. At this moment, the giant heavenly demon statue suddenly swung its fist. The fist blotted out the sky. If it landed, the entire ground would shatter. Facing the white-robed man, the Taoist demon emperor did not dare to be careless. At this moment, a sword gleam suddenly slashed at the giant heavenly demon statue's fist. Bang! In the eyes of the experts, the giant fist suddenly split open. Following this, the sword gleam pierced through the Taoist demon emperor's chest. Slash! Roar! The sound of something slicing and a cry of agony resounded in the heavens and earth at the same time. Following this, the giant heavenly demon statue gradually turned illusory, along with the Taoist demon emperor. Saint Tianhua and the others' faces darkened at the sight of this. A single slash. The Taoist demon emperor could not even take a single slash from the white-robed man. Who is he? In the air, the Taoist demon emperor glared at the white-robed man. Who are you? The white-robed man smiled and suddenly slashed with the sword in his right hand. Slash! The Taoist demon emperor's head was sent flying, and blood spurted out like a fountain. At this moment, Yi Xian quickly released the soul-suppressing sword, which devoured the Taoist demon emperor's soul in a frenzy. To the soul-suppressing sword, such a powerful soul was a great supplement. The white-robed man turned his head to look at Saint Tianhua. Saint Tianhua said in a deep voice, "Sir, I, the protector, am under the protection of the heavens and Tendo. If you," the white-robed man shook his head. "We are not afraid of any Tendo." After saying this, he shot into the sky. In the sky, Saint Tianhua's expression changed drastically. He stomped his right foot and said, "Heavenly sacred fist." As soon as he said this, he flipped his body upside down in the air and smashed his fist down. Boom! A giant illusory fist that was thousands of meters long suddenly appeared in the sky and crashed down. The power of this punch was even stronger than that of the Taoist demon giant statue from before. Soon, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the punch landed on the sword's aura. Boom! The sword's aura shook violently and paused for a moment, but in the next moment, the sword's aura shot into the sky and shattered the punch. At the same time, the sword's aura pierced through Saint Tianhua's chest. Slash! Blood splattered everywhere. Ren Pingsheng and the other experts from Tendo City turned pale at the sight of this. Saint Tianhua looked at the white-robed man below, and blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. "What a powerful sword, sir." As soon as he said this, his body became illusory. At this moment, Yi Xian's soul-suppressing sword suddenly appeared above his head. Boom! The soul-suppressing sword instantly entered Saint Tianhua's head. In an instant, Saint Tianhua's soul was completely absorbed by the sword, and the sword's aura suddenly skyrocketed. The white-robed man glanced at the soul-suppressing sword and a trace of astonishment flashed across his eyes. Not a bad sword. The soul-suppressing sword trembled slightly as if it was responding. The man in white turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian hesitated. "Senior, are you from the sword sect?" The white-clothed man nodded and smiled. "Sword sect's Lu Yunxian." Yi Xian bowed slightly. "Thank you for your help, senior." Lu Yunxian smiled and said, "We're family, no need to stand on ceremony." "One of our own?" Li Xian was stunned. Lu Yunxian asked again, "Aren't they on our side?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, "I don't think I've joined the sword sect." Lu Yunxian smiled. "But you have learned the sword sect's sword techniques, right?" Yi Xian nodded. "That's true." Lu Yunxian grinned. "Don't dwell on it." As he spoke, he turned to look at Ren Pingsheng and the others, and their expressions changed drastically when they saw Lu Yunxian look over. Meanwhile, Wuxi suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and he gazed at Yi Xian. "My young friend Yi Xian, can you give my Sky Devil race a chance?" Lu Yunxian turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "No." Wuxi spoke solemnly, "If I die, then can you spare the Sky Devil race? Yi Xian gazed at Wuxi. No. Wuxi's expression instantly became ferocious, and a powerful aura swept out from within him. At the same time, his entire body suddenly started burning. Self-destruct. He knew that if he wanted to kill Yi Xian the swordsman, then he only had one chance, and that chance was to detonate himself. He'd chosen to detonate himself decisively because he knew that he would die if he didn't. If he chose to detonate himself, then perhaps he would be able to drag someone down with him. However, he'd underestimated the white-clothed man's strength. At the instant that Wuxi chose to detonate himself, a sword suddenly stabbed into the center of his forehead. As soon as the sword stabbed into him, the powerful energy within Wuxi's body was instantly suppressed by a powerful strand of sword intent. Wuxi roared madly with rage, and he wanted to release the powerful energy within his body. However, no matter what he did, that energy was firmly suppressed and couldn't charge out from within his body. At this moment, Wuxi felt despair. Wuxi gazed at Yi Xian. Please spare the members of the Sky Devil race. Yi Xian chuckled. Would you spare me if I lost? Would you spare me from the Worldwide Academy? Wuxi wanted to say something else, but Yi Xian suddenly said, You've chosen to be my enemy, and since you've chosen to be my enemy, then you must bear the consequences. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly swung his sword. Hiss! Wuxi's head flew into the air. In the sky, Ren Pingxing suddenly said, Retreat! Retreat! As soon as he finished speaking, the Tendo experts behind him fled. Yi Xian looked at Ren Pingxing. Ren Pingxing ran the fastest, and he directly entered the spatial teleportation formation. Right at this moment, Yi Xian was about to attack, but the white-clothed man by his side moved even faster. Hiss! A sword suddenly stabbed into the center of Ren Pingxing's forehead. Bang! Ren Pingxing's soul was obliterated. The white-clothed man pressed his fingers together lightly, and a sword shot through the sky. Bloody heads fell incessantly from the sky. All the experts in the surroundings were shocked and they witnessed this scene. The white-clothed man's strength is too formidable. In a short while, at least 10,000 heads fell, and blood poured down from the sky like a fountain. It was extremely bloody. However, there were still many who fled. The white-clothed man did not chase after them, but turned to look at the sky. In the distant horizon, there stood a woman. Yi Xian turned and saw the woman. Yi Xian was slightly stunned. This woman was none other than Arrow. So she had come. Yi Xian's heart warmed slightly. The white-clothed man looked at Arrow, and the next moment, he suddenly unsheathed his sword. An array of sword light cut through the sky, slashing at Arrow. In the distance, Arrow suddenly drew his sword and placed it against his throat. Seeing this, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. Chapter 1053. When Arrow placed his sword on his throat, Yi Xian was shocked. He wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Chi! The white-robed man's sword light disappeared without a trace. At the same time, the white-robed man's throat split open, and blood spurted out. Yi Xian was shocked. He looked at the white-robed man. The white-robed man retreated several thousand zhang. When the white-robed man stopped, he touched his throat and looked at Arrow. Arrow looked at Yi Xian and said, Let's go. With that said, she turned around and disappeared. The 100 white-robed experts with blades also followed closely behind and left. Yi Xian turned to look at the white-robed man. The white-robed man smiled and said, It's fine. She showed mercy. Hearing that, Yi Xian's heart relaxed. At the same time, he was shocked. Without a doubt, Arrow's strength was above the white-robed man. How strong was Arrow? Yi Xian had no idea. At this time, the white-robed man suddenly smiled and said, Junior brother, it's time for us to leave. Yi Xian looked at the white-robed man and asked, Senior brother, you're leaving? The white-robed man nodded. The three of us have important responsibilities. It's not good for us to stay here for long. Yi Xian hesitated and asked, "Senior brother, where are you?" The white-robed man smiled and said, "Somewhere far away. We'll meet again in the future." With that said, he turned to old Gu and said, "Junior brother Gu, take good care of junior brother." With that said, the three turned into 3 rays of sword light and soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared into the horizon. They left. Yi Xian fell silent. Sword sect. Originally, he thought that the sword sect had declined. But now, it seemed that the sword sect had not declined. In fact, it was extremely strong. Just a few of them could beat up a sovereign realm expert. Right at this time, Zhang Wenxiu walked to Yi Xian's side and asked, "What should we do now?" Yi Xian said softly, "Kill them all." Zhang Wenxiu wanted to say something but hesitated. Yi Xian looked at Zhang Wenxiu. "Wenxiu, we can't be merciful." With that, he looked up at Xiao Dao in the distance. "Miss Xiao Dao, I need to borrow your teleportation array." If he wanted to go to the Tendo Star Field, he would have to use the Xiao Dao's teleportation formation. Otherwise, with his strength, it would take him at least 10 years to reach there. Xiao Dao was silent. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Miss Xiao Dao, you won't stop me, will you?" Xiao Dao shook his head. "I didn't stop them from looking for you, so I won't stop you from looking for them." With that, she gently waved her lily-white hand and a teleportation array appeared in front of Yi Xian. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. "What do you want to do?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "Miss Xiao Dao, what do you think?" Xiao Dao nodded slightly. "It's not as simple as you think." Yi Xian was silent. Xiao Dao said again, "Come to the pawn shop when you have time." With that, she disappeared. Yi Xian turned to look at Zhang Wenxiu. "Wait for me here." Zhang Wenxiu said, "Will you come back?" Yi Xian smiled. "Definitely." With that, he and Mr. Gu entered the teleportation formation. Soon, the two disappeared. At this moment, the headmaster appeared beside Zhang Wenxiu. He looked at the place where Yi Xian and Mr. Gu disappeared and said softly, "He won't let it go." Zhang Wenxiu nodded. There was a trace of worry in her eyes. In the pawn shop of the boundless underground city, Xiao Dao sat behind the counter and flipped through an ancient book. After a while, she shook her head and said softly, "Things are getting more and more serious." With that, she closed the ancient book. At this moment, a woman appeared in the pawn shop. A one-legged woman. Xiao Dao looked at the one-legged woman. "Why are you here again?" The one-legged woman said, "The sword sect." Xiao Dao smiled. "You want to know about the sword sect?" The one-legged woman was silent. Xiao Dao smiled and handed the ancient book to the one-legged woman. After a while, the one-legged woman frowned deeply. Xiao Dao took the ancient book and said, surprised. The one-legged woman was silent. Xiao Dao suddenly asked, "By the way, aren't you tired of staying here for so long?" The one-legged woman said calmly, "Aren't you the same?" Xiao Dao smiled. "I'm a little bored." The one-legged woman suddenly turned and left. When she reached the door, she suddenly turned and looked at Xiao Dao. "Is the sword sect the strongest power?" Xiao Dao nodded. "Yes." The one-legged woman was silent for a while and asked, "How strong is it?" Xiao Dao smiled. "Guess." The one-legged woman glanced at Xiao Dao. "Boring." With that, she turned and disappeared. In the pawn shop, Xiao Dao turned and walked behind the counter. She glanced at the ancient book on the counter with a gloomy expression. No one knew what she was thinking. After a while, Xiao Dao stood up and left. Tendo Galaxy. Yi Xian and Mr. Gu arrived at Tendo Galaxy. In the sky above Tendo City, Yi Xian looked down expressionlessly. At this moment, Tendo City felt threatened. Countless Tendo powerhouses had gathered. However, there were only a few powerhouses left in Tendo City. Yi Xian saw two familiar figures in the crowd below. It was Tian Han and Tian Yen. At this moment, both of them were looking at Yi Xian as well. They were naturally aware of what had happened between Yi Xian, Tendo City, and the Sky Fiend clan. Without a doubt, Yi Xian was here to take revenge. Neither of them had expected that things would develop to this point. In the sky, Yi Xian withdrew his gaze and said, "Kill." Mr. Gu nodded. He transformed into a ray of light and charged down. An old man suddenly roared furiously when he saw Mr. Gu charging down. "Defend." As soon as he spoke, countless powerhouses of Tendo City charged into the sky. Tian Han and Tian Yen were about to attack as well. Right at this moment, Yi Xian appeared before them. Tian Han looked at Yi Xian. "Can you let Tendo City go?" At this moment, all the powerhouses of Tendo City were being slaughtered. In the entire city of Tendo, no one was Mr. Gu's match. He was a sovereign realm expert. Not to mention these people, even Saint Tianhua wouldn't be able to defeat Mr. Gu in a one-on-one battle. But now, there were no sovereign realm experts in the entire city of Tendo. Even rebirth realm experts were rare. Hearing Tian Han's words, Yi Xian shook his head. "No." Tian Han's face sank. "Stop." At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, "You want to save Tendo City?" Tian Han looked at Yi Xian. "What do you mean?" Yi Xian looked at Tian Han and said, "You will be the city lord of Tendo City." Tian Han frowned. "What do you mean?" Tian Yen suddenly said, "He wants to control the star field of Tendo." Yi Xian looked at Tian Yen. Tian Yen said calmly, "If you don't want him to destroy Tiandao City, there's only one possibility, and that is for Tiandao City to have a different master, a master who listens to him." She looked at Yi Xian. "Am I right?" Yi Xian smiled. "Yes." In fact, Tian Yen was the best candidate. However, he didn't choose Tian Yen because she was too scheming. Of course, the real reason was because he had a good impression of Tian Han. At this time, Tian Han suddenly said, "As long as I agree to be the city lord of Tendo City, will you stop the slaughter?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." Tian Han said, "They won't listen to me." Yi Xian smiled. "I will kill whoever doesn't listen to me." Tian Han looked at Yi Xian for a moment and said, "Fine. I'll be the city lord of Tendo City." Yi Xian nodded, and then he turned around to look at Old Gu. "Old Gu, that's enough." Old Gu stopped. Countless experts of Tendo City gazed at Old Gu, and their eyes were filled with fear. Yi Xian glanced at them and said, "From this moment onward, Tian Han is the city lord of Tendo City. Is there anyone who doesn't agree with this?" No one dared to answer him. Yi Xian turned around to look at Tian Han. "If anyone in the city dares to disagree with you in the future, then tell me, and I'll kill them for you." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Tian Han fell silent. She knew that she couldn't leave Yi Xian. Because there were definitely many people in Tendo City who didn't agree with her. If Yi Xian wasn't there to suppress her, then she wouldn't be able to hold her position as the city lord. Simply speaking, if she wanted to save Tendo City, then she had to be the city lord, and she had to listen to Yi Xian. Because if she wasn't controlled by Yi Xian, then she wouldn't be able to hold her position as the city lord of Tiandao City. Right at this moment, Tian Yen spoke abruptly, "This is already the best outcome." Tian Han looked at Tian Yen, and Tian Yen spoke softly, "If Big Sister hadn't formed that good karma with him, then Tendo City would have definitely suffered a massacre today." Tian Han fell silent. Tian Yen spoke softly, "Let's look at it from another angle. Actually, this might not be a bad thing for our Tian family. The forces behind Yi Xian are so formidable, and it's a good thing for our Tian family to have him as our backing." Tian Han spoke in a low voice, "He glanced at you earlier. Actually, he should have chosen you." Tian Yen shook her head, "He won't choose me." Tian Han asked, why? Tian Yen spoke softly, my thoughts are deep, deeper than yours. Hearing this, Tian Han understood. At this moment, Tian Yen spoke again, he's making use of us, and we can also make use of him to strengthen the Tian family. Of course, if no one in our Tian family surpasses him in strength, then the primary position between us will always be him being the secondary. Saying that, she paused for a moment. Of course, this isn't a bad thing. Tian Han nodded, indeed, it's not a bad thing. Saying that, she looked up at the sky, will the Heavenly Fiend clan surrender as well? Tian Yen did not speak. Soon, Yi Xian and Gu Gu arrived at Heavenly Demon City. At this moment, countless Heavenly Fiend clans powerhouses had gathered in Heavenly Demon City. Apart from that, there was a huge black array in the sky above Heavenly Demon City. That array was like a needle disc suspended above Heavenly Demon City. On top of Heavenly Demon City's city walls, there were countless Heavenly Fiend clans powerhouses. It could be said that all the powerhouses of the Heavenly Fiend clan had arrived. And the one leading them was Lin Mo. At this moment, Yi Xian and Gu Gu appeared in front of Lin Mo. Yi Xian looked at Lin Mo. Lin Mo smiled. Yi Xian, you're here for revenge. Yi Xian nodded, yes. Lin Mo smiled, I know about what happened in Tendo City. Yi Xian smiled, what's your choice? Lin Mo looked at Yi Xian and smiled, you're going to be disappointed. My Heavenly Fiend clan would rather die than surrender. Yi Xian nodded and turned to look at Gu Gu, massacre the city. Kill all the martial artists. P.S. I know I'm guilty and dare not speak further. Chapter 1054. Ancient Gu charged down when he heard Yi Xian, and an expanse of sword light descended. Bang! In an instant, a few dozen heads flew into the air. Suddenly, the formation in the sky above Sky Devil City started to revolve, and it didn't take long for an enormous beam of light to erupt from within it and blast towards Ancient Gu. Ancient Gu's face was emotionless as he pressed his fingers together and pointed downwards. A sword suddenly flew out from the sword chest on his back, and it slashed against the beam of light. Bang! An explosion resounded as the black ray of light shattered. At the same time, Ancient Gu slashed down once more. Hiss! The sword tore through the air and slashed directly at the disc needle formation. In an instant, the entire disc needle formation collapsed. The expressions of the countless experts of the Sky Devil race instantly became unsightly when they witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, Lin Mo, who stood before Yi Xian, suddenly leaped up and blasted his palm towards Yi Xian. At the same time, the other two extraordinary experts of the Sky Devil race attacked in unison. Obviously, they intended to deal with Yi Xian first. Yi Xian's face was emotionless. He suddenly drew his sword when Lin Mo's group of three suddenly charged towards him. Bang! A ray of sword light slashed down, and Lin Mo was instantly blasted flying. At the same time, two bloody heads drifted down to the ground beneath Yi Xian's feet. Ancient Gu's expression eased up slightly when he witnessed this scene, and then he turned around and stabbed with his sword. Hiss! A ray of sword light shot forward, and a head flew into the air. Even though Ancient Gu was formidable, the experts of the Sky Devil race didn't shrink back, and they charged incessantly towards Ancient Gu. Fight to the death. At this moment, all the experts of the Sky Devil race had chosen to fight to the death. Lin Mo gazed at Yi Xian with a ferocious expression on his face. Yi Xian, right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished. Lin Mo's pupils constricted, and then he crossed his arms before him to block Chen Shi's attack. Bang! The ray of sword light shattered, and Lin Mo was instantly pushed over 1 kilometer back. As soon as he stopped moving, his arms were instantly blasted into pieces. Lin Mo's face sank when he witnessed this scene. He raised his head to look at Yi Xian, and he was just about to speak when a ray of sword light flashed through his throat at a shocking speed. Chi! A stream of blood spurted from Lin Mo's throat. Lin Mo's eyes were wide open as he breathed his last. Yi Xian turned and looked into the distance. At this moment, bloody heads were falling from the sky, accompanied by fresh blood. Massacre. With ancient Gu's strength, there was no one in the Sky Devil clan who could stop him. Not only could no one stop old Gu, no one could stop Yi Xian either. Although Yi Xian's combat strength wasn't as strong as Gu's, his defensive capabilities were even more terrifying than Gu's. Ordinary forces wouldn't be able to harm him at all. Within Heavenly Devil City, Heavenly Devil race's experts were dying one after another. In the beginning, these Heavenly Devil race's experts had chosen to fight to the death, but towards the end, some Heavenly Devil race's experts began to flee. That was because Yi Xian and Elder Gu were too powerful. About 2 hours later, Elder Gu and Yi Xian stopped. At this moment, Heavenly Devil City was littered with corpses, and the city was filled with the pungent smell of blood. It could be said that all the top-notch experts in Heavenly Devil City had been slaughtered. Not far in front of Yi Xian, the soul-suppressing sword floated quietly, devouring the souls around it. Looking at the soul-suppressing sword before him, Yi Xian smiled. Elder Gu, what do you think of this sword? Elder Gu glanced at the soul-suppressing sword. Not bad. Yi Xian nodded. It's not bad indeed. The soul-suppressing sword had been with him for so long that it had long surpassed its original level. It could be said that if it continued to devour souls like this, even the executing heaven sword wouldn't be able to compare to it. This was because it would continue to grow stronger. At this moment, Elder Gu scanned the surroundings. There won't be any Heavenly Devil race in the future. Yi Xian nodded. Let's go. Having said that, he turned and left with Elder Gu. At this moment, a pitch-black whirlpool suddenly appeared in the sky above Heavenly Devil City. Soon, a shadow appeared in the black whirlpool. Yi Xian and Elder Gu turned around. Elder Gu's eyes narrowed as he looked at the shadow, and the sword chest on his back trembled as it accumulated energy. Yi Xian looked at the shadow emotionlessly. The Heavenly Devil race? The shadow said, Yi Xian, you're really ruthless. Yi Xian smiled. Ruthless? I think I'm merciful enough. The shadow sneered, merciful. Yi Xian, I'll remember this. As soon as he finished speaking, the shadow gradually turned illusory. Meanwhile, Yi Xian spoke abruptly, Elder Gu, kill him. As soon as he spoke, Elder Gu vanished on the spot, and a ray of light slashed towards the shadow. Meanwhile, the shadow suddenly smashed his fist forward. Bang! The ray of light shattered. Yi Xian frowned when he saw that. Elder Gu frowned slightly as well. He was about to attack again when the shadow had turned completely illusory. He vanished. Yi Xian's face sank. Meanwhile, Elder Gu said, this person isn't simple. Young master, you must be careful. Yi Xian nodded. He glanced at the surroundings and vanished on the spot. He didn't leave right away. Instead, he started to plunder the Heavenly Devil race's treasures. The Heavenly Devil race's treasures naturally weren't attractive to him, but they were very useful to the people around him. The reason he subdued Tendo City was to develop his own forces. In a short while, Yi Xian ransacked the entire Tendo City. At this moment, Heavenly Devil City had become an empty city because those who were lucky enough to survive had basically fled. The news of Yi Xian slaughtering the Heavenly Devil race spread quickly. Of course, most people were talking about the swordsman behind Yi Xian. The swordsman who killed several sovereign realm experts in Tendo City and the Heavenly Devil race as soon as they appeared. The Sword Sect. This mysterious force gradually emerged in the eyes of the world. After Yi Xian and Elder Gu left Heavenly Devil City, the two of them arrived at Tendo City. In a great hall, Yi Xian summoned Tian Han and Tian Yan. Yi Xian looked at Tian Han. Are there any difficulties? Tian Han said solemnly, there were in the beginning, but after massacring Heavenly Devil City, the voices of opposition disappeared. Yi Xian nodded. Contact me if you need anything. Also, don't be merciful or you'll hurt yourself. Tian Han was silent. Yi Xian walked up to Tian Yen. Tian Yen wasn't afraid and looked straight at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, "Sister assist, do you understand what I mean?" Tian Yen was silent. Yi Xian said again, "Contact me if you need anything." Tian Yen asked, "What do you want us to do?" Yi Xian said, "I'll contact you when I need you." With that, he left with Elder Gu. In the hall, Tian Han sighed softly. At this moment, Tian Yen suddenly said, "Sister, we should express our stance to him." Tian Han looked at Tian Yen. Tian Yen said softly, "He won't be merciful to us a second time." Tian Han was silent. Yi Xian and Elder Gu returned to the Worldwide Academy. After returning, Yi Xian took out the Worldwide Library and the Prison Pagoda. Beside him were the female teacher, Zhang Wenxiu, and Elder Gu. The female teacher looked at the Worldwide Library in Yi Xian's hands and said softly, "You're sure you want to open the library? Are you sure you want to open the library?" Yi Xian nodded. Now that the Tao Protectors and the Heavenly Devil clan have been destroyed, there shouldn't be anyone coming after me. The female teacher said, "What if there is?" Yi Xian smiled. "Isn't that a good thing? I can see how many enemies I have." The female teacher nodded. "That's true." Yi Xian's eyes slowly moved. He activated the prison pagoda. Soon, the prison pagoda shrank and turned into a beam of light that entered the Worldwide Library. Boom! A ray of light suddenly soared into the sky from the myriad-dimensional book house. This ray of light directly entered the endless starry sky. At this moment, countless gazes from various star regions looked over. In the boundless underground city, a one-legged woman suddenly raised her head. She looked at the sky and frowned slightly. The next moment, she disappeared. Nothingness dimension. In the endless graveyard, the old tomb guard suddenly raised his head. A moment later, his brows furrowed deeply. In the pawn shop, Xiao Dao, who was lying on the counter, suddenly raised her head. She frowned. "Do you want to die?" In the Worldwide Academy, Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw the huge commotion caused by the Worldwide Library and the prison pagoda. This commotion was too big. In the square, everyone looked at the library. At this moment, many powerful auras appeared in the sky above the Worldwide Academy. These auras were very obscure. Their true bodies hadn't appeared yet. They were hidden in the starry sky. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian frowned slightly. There were still quite a number of powerhouses eyeing the Universal Dimension Library. Were they not afraid of death? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. Not far from him, the sword box on Old Gu's back started to tremble. It was ready to strike at any moment. At this moment, the library suddenly shook violently. At the same time, the number of powerful auras in the surroundings increased. The weakest of these auras was at the ruler realm. At this moment, Yi Xian was shocked. In the sky, a white light suddenly appeared in the library. Within the white light, there was a door. On the door, there was a small indent. At this time, the prison pagoda slowly floated towards the indent. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on the Worldwide Library. In the surroundings, the number of powerful auras increased. Moreover, they were increasing at a rapid speed. Yi Xian's face turned gloomy. He hadn't expected so many experts to appear. Wasn't it just a library? At this time, a white figure suddenly appeared not far from Yi Xian. This person was Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "Do you think you're invincible now?" Yi Xian fell silent. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian and said, "There are two paths now. The first is to call the plain-dressed woman. The second is to call all the experts of the sword sect over." Yi Xian frowned slightly and said, "Is it that serious?" Xiao Dao's expression suddenly turned icy cold and said, "I think you're getting arrogant." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Miss Xiao Dao, it isn't as serious as you think, right? Moreover, I should be able to protect myself now. Xiao Dao suddenly turned around to look at old Gu, and then she smashed her fist forward. Old Gu's expression changed, and he swiftly drew his sword and slashed. Bang! Along with an explosion, Gu instantly retreated several tens of thousands of feet under everyone's gazes. As soon as he stopped moving, a mysterious force immediately imprisoned him, causing him to be unable to move. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian and said, "Come, tell me how to protect myself now." Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "Miss Xiao Dao, if you don't." Xiao Dao suddenly roared furiously, "Idiot! My greatest reliance is the old man Swordsman, and there are no less than 10 people here who can defeat him. Do you think I'll be safe if I don't act?" Chapter 1055. 10. Yi Xian frowned. Just as he was about to speak, Xiao Dao added, "Once someone restrains him, how many can you, Yi Xian, fight against?" Yi Xian fell silent. Xiao Dao sucked in a deep breath. "Don't think that you're invincible just because you've grown stronger and a mysterious force has appeared behind you." With that said, she turned and left. At this time, a voice rang in Yi Xian's mind. "Don't open." It was Arrow's voice. Yi Xian didn't hesitate. With a wave of his right hand, the World Prison Pagoda and Myriad Dimension Library returned to his hand. Seeing this scene, the female teacher and Zhang Wenxiu heaved a sigh of relief. In fact, they were panicking just now. The number of experts in the sky above the worldwide academy was increasing. Moreover, these experts were very strong. Among them, there were more than 10 sovereign realm experts. Yi Xian didn't expect that there would be so many experts. Moreover, there were so many sovereign realm experts among them. This wasn't normal. Yi Xian raised his head to look at the sky. Where did these sovereign realm experts come from? Originally, he thought that after slaughtering the heavenly devil race, he would be able to intimidate these forces. But now, it seemed like he wasn't able to do so. Just as Xiao Dao had said, he was a little arrogant. In other words, he had greatly underestimated the importance of the Myriad Dimension Library. Right at this time, the powerful auras in the sky gradually disappeared. Yi Xian swept a glance at the sky and turned to leave. As long as he didn't open the library, these forces wouldn't find trouble with him. However, the moment he opened it, these forces and experts would definitely take action. Just as Xiao Dao had said, unless he called for the woman in the plain dress or the experts from the sword sect. In a short while, the worldwide academy returned to normal. In the courtyard, Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ta and the Myriad Dimension Library in front of him in silence. This thing was really a hot potato now. Zhang Wenxiu and the female teacher suddenly walked in front of Yi Xian. The female teacher said, "I think it's not the right time yet." Yi Xian and Zhang Wenxiu looked at the headmaster. The headmaster said softly, "Since this study room is in your hands, it must be the master's intention. Since it cannot be opened now, it must be because the time is not right." Yi Xian said solemnly, "When will the time come?" The female teacher shook her head. "I don't know." Yi Xian sighed softly. The female teacher continued, "You don't have to worry. As long as you don't open the study room, those forces and experts won't dare to touch you. But if you open it, they will disregard everything." Yi Xian nodded. "I'm not worried about ordinary people. What I'm worried about is the endless dungeon, the dimension of nothingness, and Xiao Dao." His intuition told him that Xiao Dao might also be interested in that study room. The female teacher said, "No matter what, don't touch the study room now." Yi Xian smiled and said, "You guys be careful too. I'll make a trip back to Fu Wenzong." With that, he turned and left. As if he thought of something, he suddenly turned to look at Zhang Wenxiu and Zhang Wenxiu. "The two of you must reach the rebirth realm." Zhang Wenxiu shook her head. "It's not that simple." Yi Xian opened his palm, and an ancient book appeared in his hand. He handed it to the two women. My sister left this for me. It should be of great help to the two of you. Zhang Wenxiu took the ancient book. After taking a look, her expression instantly turned serious. You, Yi Xian said, reach the rebirth realm as soon as possible. Zhang Wenxiu and the female teacher's combat strength was not weak. If they reached the rebirth realm, with the help of external objects, they could definitely fight against a ruler realm expert. After Yi Xian left the Worldwide Academy, Zhang Wenxiu and the female teacher went into seclusion. In order to let the two women break through to the rebirth realm with peace of mind, Yi Xian left old Gu in the academy. As for him, he returned to Fu Wenzong. Just as he returned to Fu Wenzong, a sword light suddenly slashed at him. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. He suddenly pulled out his sword and stabbed it at the sword light. Boom! The sword light exploded, but in the next moment, a sword suddenly slashed at his forehead from a strange angle. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. He dodged to the side and twisted his wrist. The sword in his hand slashed out horizontally. Bang! Yi Xian felt his sword being blocked by something. In the next moment, the sword light was already in front of his throat. He did not choose to block the sword. Instead, he stabbed out with his sword. Chi! The sword pierced thin air. Yi Xian looked at the opposite side. There was a little girl standing there. Little Seven. Little Seven stood there quietly, holding a sheathed sword in her hand. Little Seven looked at Yi Xian. With a strong physique, you can really do whatever you want. If it was an ordinary person, they would definitely not dare to exchange their life for another like Yi Xian. But there was no other way. Yi Xian's physique was too strong. That sword strike was faster than Yi Xian's, but it was useless. Her sword could not kill Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. Little Seven, you are much stronger than before. Little Seven nodded. You too. Yi Xian looked around. Where are Little N and Wan Li? Little Seven said, they left. Left? Yi Xian frowned. Where did they go? Little Seven said, they went to train. Yi Xian's face sank. Little Seven suddenly said, don't worry too much. The two of them have reached the Karma realm. Their combat strength is extraordinary. Ordinary people will not be able to hurt them. Yi Xian nodded slightly. He was well aware of Enlanxiu's and Lian Wanli's strength. With their battle prowess, as long as they didn't run into a sovereign, they wouldn't be in any danger. Yi Xian looked at Little Seven. Are you going to wait for me? Little Seven nodded. I want to fight you. Yi Xian smiled. Okay. Little Seven looked at Yi Xian. Be careful. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly disappeared. A sword light instantly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian raised his sword to block. Boom! Yi Xian retreated several feet with his sword. At the same time, several afterimages of the sword flashed beside Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly struck with his sword. Boom! 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 Yi Xian retreated several dozen feet again. The moment he stopped, a snow-white sword light descended from above his head. Yi Xian stabbed out. Head on. This sword stabbed into the sword light. The sword light exploded, and a sword blocked Yi Xian's sword. Boom! The space around Yi Xian cracked. At this moment, Little Seven, who was above Yi Xian's head, suddenly disappeared. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and raised his sword to block. Boom! A powerful force swept across his sword. In an instant, Yi Xian retreated several dozen feet. In front of Yi Xian, Little Seven disappeared again. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly pulled out his sword and slashed. Rumble. A wave of sword light exploded in front of Yi Xian. A shadow retreated. The one who retreated was Little Seven. The moment Little Seven stopped, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of her. At the same time, a sword was already at her brow. She squinted her eyes and used her sword to block. Very quickly, her expression changed. She stomped her right foot and retreated hundreds of feet. After little Seven stopped, she lowered her head and looked at her right wrist. There was a thin sword mark on it. Xiao Qi looked at Yi Xian. That sword strike of yours was fake. Yi Xian nodded, illusionary sword. Real and fake, it changes endlessly. Little Seven said, you just learned it? Yi Xian nodded, do you want to learn it? Little Seven shook her head, come, take my sword. After saying that, she held the sword with both hands and placed it on her brow. In the next moment, she disappeared from the spot. In the battlefield, a sword light slashed across. In the distance, Yi Xian squinted his eyes. He didn't choose to retreat. He stepped forwards and slashed with his sword. Sword to decide life and death. With this slash, Xiao Qi's sword light was forced to stop, but it didn't disappear. Right at that moment, little Seven hollered in rage. She held the sword with both hands and spun it. Hong! Yi Xian retreated in a frenzy. Right at that moment, Yi Xian stomped his right foot and pushed forward with his sword. Hong long! The sword light exploded, and Xiao Qi was sent flying dozens of feet away. After little Seven stopped, she looked at Yi Xian, let's fight in the future. Yi Xian nodded and smiled, okay. Little Seven sheathed her sword and said softly, I am leaving. Yi Xian frowned, where are you going? Little Seven looked into the sky and said softly, a place that I don't know about. Yi Xian still wanted to ask, but Xiao Qi suddenly turned into a sword light and disappeared into the horizon. She left. On the spot, Yi Xian kept silent. Where did little Seven go? Without thinking much, Yi Xian turned around and returned to Fu Wenzong. Inside Fu Wenzong, Yi Xian met Fu Wenzong sect leader Shen Xinghe. Shen Xinghe looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. The youth in front of him was much stronger than before. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly took out a storage ring and passed it to Shen Xinghe. Shen Xinghe looked at Yi Xian, this is? Yi Xian smiled, this is something I got from Sky Demon City. It should be very beneficial to the disciples and elders of Fu Wenzong. Shen Xinghe took a look at the storage ring and very quickly, his expression changed. The things in the storage ring weren't ordinary. Shen Xinghe looked at Yi Xian, this, Yi Xian said softly, give it to the disciples of Fu Wenzong. As for how to distribute it, old Shen, you decide. Don't reject it. Our Fu Wenzong needs to become stronger. Stronger. The current Fu Wenzong was still too weak compared to those ancient powers. If they were to go up against a power like Tendo City, Fu Wenzong wouldn't even have the strength to fight back. Shen Xinghe kept the storage ring and asked, what do you plan to do next? Yi Xian said softly, become stronger. The current him could barely fight sovereign realm experts, but he didn't have the confidence to defeat them. Opening the study room made him realize that even though he had eliminated the Protectors and the Sky Demon clan, it didn't mean that he was in danger. Moreover, before Big Sister Shui left, she told him that she hoped he could fight alongside them in the future. Them. He knew that Big Sister Shui was talking about the Sword Sect. In other words, the Sword Sect. The Sword Sect definitely had enemies. Moreover, the Sword Sect was so powerful, yet they still had enemies. One could only imagine how strong their enemies were. In addition, there was the fifth dimension tribulation. The fifth dimension tribulation that all the powers were afraid of. If the fifth dimension tribulation came, what should he do? Right at this time, the ninth floor's voice suddenly sounded, I'll take you to a place. Yi Xian asked, where? The ninth floor said, the place I stayed in before. Yi Xian was stunned for a moment, then he asked, what is that place? The ninth floor said, the dimension of nothingness. Yi Xian was stunned. Right at this time, in the 7th floor of the World Prison Pagoda, the 9th floor who was lying on the ground suddenly opened his eyes, but he quickly closed them again. A faint voice sounded from the pagoda. Insufficient battery, please charge. Insufficient battery, please charge. P.S. Many thanks to the monthly ticket tips from friends like Ergo's surname Chen, and Mailwan is unrivaled. The two brothers have given me too many tips. I really have to thank the two brothers. Recently, I haven't added any chapters, and I haven't broken through yet. Giving so many tips. I feel really guilty. Even I can't help but blush. When I told the people around me that someone had given me so many tips, they called me an idiot. How could such a thing happen? It's really too difficult to write in peace during the new year. I won't forget this breakthrough. As a person, I still have my principles. Chapter 1056. Nothingness Dimension. Yi Xian's face darkened. Naturally, he knew a little about this place. It was a very dangerous place. He did not expect the 9th floor to come from that place. Yi Xian asked, "Senior, are you really from the nothingness dimension?" The 9th floor replied, "Do I get anything out of lying to you?" Yi Xian smiled, "No, I'm just surprised. I didn't expect you to come from that place." The 9th floor replied after a moment of silence, "There's nothing surprising about that place." That place. Yi Xian listened quietly. He also wanted to know more about the nothingness dimension. However, the 9th floor did not want to talk about it. Yi Xian hesitated and said, "Senior, that place is dangerous." The 9th floor replied, "Yes." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "What kind of place is that?" The 9th floor was silent. Yi Xian said, "Senior, I don't think there's anything to hide, right?" The 9th floor replied, "You have to ask Xiao Dao." Yi Xian frowned, "Why?" The 9th floor replied, "I'm afraid of death." Yi Xian was speechless. The 9th floor added, "It's not that I don't want to tell you. I can't tell you about that place's origin and secret. I can't bear the consequences, but Xiao Dao can. You can ask her. She's not afraid of death." Yi Xian asked again, "Do you know about Xiao Dao's origin?" The 9th floor replied, "I don't." Yi Xian's face darkened, "Senior, what do you know?" The 9th floor sighed, "I'm helpless too. I can't tell you what I know, and I don't dare to ask what I don't know." Sigh. Yi Xian asked, "Senior, why do you want me to go to the nothingness dimension?" The 9th floor replied, "To reap benefits." Yi Xian's face darkened, "We're so close. Don't try to fool me." After a moment of silence, the 9th floor said, "If you want to reach the rebirth state as soon as possible, that place is the most suitable." Yi Xian frowned. "Why?" "Because there are two things there, the tomb and the well of reincarnation. With these two items, you will have a much easier time reaching the rebirth state." Xiao Dao said that place is currently the #1 power because they have these two things. Of course, they don't just have these two things. In short, you'll know when you get there. Yi Xian said solemnly, "Wasn't it said to be very dangerous?" "It's dangerous, but you're different. Even heaven's chosen one isn't a match for you. What are you afraid of?" Yi Xian was speechless. "Of course, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm asking you to go for a bit of a selfish reason. I want to go back and take a look. As for whether to go or not, it's up to you." After a moment of silence, Yi Xian asked, "Senior, can I really use those two items to quickly reach the rebirth state?" The 9th house replied, "Yes. Of course, the prerequisite is that you can borrow them." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "I'll give it a try." With that, he turned and left. Soon, Yi Xian arrived at the boundless underground city. Inside the pawn shop. Yi Xian walked into the pawn shop. Xiao Dao was still there. Xiao Dao glanced at him and didn't speak. Yi Xian chuckled, "Hello, Miss Xiao Dao." Xiao Dao was expressionless and didn't speak. Yi Xian walked to the counter. Miss Xiao Dao, are you still angry? Xiao Dao said indifferently, why should I be angry? Yi Xian said, the study room. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian, I'm not angry at all. Anyway, you're the one who dies, not me. Yi Xian said solemnly, I underestimated the temptation of the study room. However, what I don't understand is, why do those super experts care so much about the study room? Could it be that the prophet is really a god in their hearts? What makes them think that the study room left behind by the prophet can resist the fifth dimension calamity? Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian for a moment and said, not only did you underestimate the study room, but you also underestimated the prophet. Yi Xian asked, why do you say that? Xiao Dao closed the ancient book on the counter and said, the prophet has many books, they are time, space, human, seamless, matter, past, present, future. As she said, she looked at Yi Xian, if these books are measured in terms of items, the value of each book far surpasses any divine object in this world. Even ordinary swords are worthless in front of these books. Hearing this, Yi Xian frowned slightly, so powerful? A complicated look flashed in Xiao Dao's eyes, we are pursuing longevity, pursuing the peak of martial arts, while he is pursuing the truth. Truth? Yi Xian was puzzled, what do you mean? Xiao Dao shook her head, you illiterate. Yi Xian, Xiao Dao said again, you only need to understand one thing, that is, his understanding of this world, of this universe, surpasses that of anyone in this world. That's why he's so powerful. As she said this, she looked at Yi Xian, do you think I'm powerful? Yi Xian nodded quickly, you're powerful, you're powerful. Xiao Dao said calmly, but I think he's powerful. Hearing this, Yi Xian understood. Suddenly, Xiao Dao said, why are you here this time? Yi Xian collected his thoughts and said, Miss Xiao Dao, I want to ask you about the dimension of nothingness. Hearing this, Xiao Dao frowned slightly, Yi Xian, are you so arrogant that you can't recognize yourself? Yi Xian quickly said, it's ninth floor who asked me to go. Ninth floor suddenly said, damn. Why are you like this? Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian's abdomen, you want him to go to the dimension of nothingness. After a moment of silence, ninth floor said, he has already reached the peak of the karma state. If he wants to reach the rebirth state without using the tomb and the reincarnation well, conservatively speaking, it will take at least a few decades. Xiao Dao said coldly, you came from that place, don't you know how dangerous it is? Ninth floor said, if anyone else goes there, they will die, but he is different. Xiao Dao was silent. Ninth floor said again, Miss Xiao Dao, I think we can let him try. Xiao Dao shook her head, then looked at Yi Xian, you make your own decision. Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, is it very dangerous? Xiao Dao nodded, very dangerous. Yi Xian asked again, how dangerous? Xiao Dao smiled, it will definitely be the most dangerous place you have ever encountered. Yi Xian frowned, why? Xiao Dao shook her head, no longer saying anything. Yi Xian was a little afraid, he quickly asked again, Miss Xiao Dao, tell me more. Xiao Dao said indifferently, my suggestion is not to go. Of course, if you want to reach the rebirth state, that place is indeed your best choice, but high opportunities also mean high risks. So, you do as you see fit. Yi Xian was silent. Xiao Dao glanced at Yi Xian, do you know who the last figure that appeared in Sky Demon City was? Yi Xian shook his head. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian, that was the leader of the Sky Demon race, an ancient ruler. This patriarch is an ancient paragon. He won't let you off for destroying the Celestial Devil clan. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Miss Xiao Dao, do you think I should go to the void dimension? Xiao Dao smiled, this is your choice, I won't say anything. Yi Xian sighed, turned around, and left. At this moment, a gust of wind came from behind him. Yi Xian stopped, turned around, and a black bag landed in front of him. He looked at Xiao Dao, this is? Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian, it's for you. Saying that, she walked in front of Yi Xian. Don't open it unless it's absolutely necessary. Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned, then bowed respectfully. Thank you. Xiao Dao said calmly, let's go. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Xiao Dao, do you have any life-saving divine items? For example, the Needle of Fate. I think it's very good. Xiao Dao suddenly said, scram. Yi Xian. A moment later, Yi Xian left the pawn shop, and when he left, he was abnormally happy. In the pawn shop, Xiao Dao shook her head, smiled, and took out an ancient book to read. The first page of the book had 2 words, space. After Yi Xian left the pawn shop, he stopped on the street, because not far in front of him stood a one-legged woman. Danger. That was what Yi Xian was feeling at this moment. The one-legged woman looked at Yi Xian, not saying a word. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then said, Senior, is there something? The one-legged woman floated in front of Yi Xian, looked at Yi Xian, and said, Can you not come back? Her voice was as cold as ice. Yi Xian was stunned, and then said seriously, Senior, I like it here. The one-legged woman looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian said seriously, Senior, The one-legged woman suddenly said, Do me a favor. Help? Yi Xian blinked, and then hurriedly said, Senior, please speak. This one-legged woman in front of him was not ordinary, and if he could form a good relationship with her, it would definitely be a good thing. The one-legged woman looked at Yi Xian. My hands are itching. Yi Xian was stunned. At this moment, the one-legged woman punched at Yi Xian's face. Yi Xian did not even have time to react, and was directly punched in the face. Boom! Yi Xian was sent flying, and this time, he flew a few hundred zhang away. In the surroundings, some experts peeked out, but when they saw the one-legged woman, they instantly disappeared without a trace. In this boundless underground city, there were 2 people that must not be offended. One was Xiao Dao, and the other was this one-legged woman. In the distance, Yi Xian climbed up, and at this moment, the one-legged woman turned and left. Yi Xian said angrily, How can you do this? The one-legged woman turned to look at Yi Xian, one-on-one. Yi Xian suddenly said, Kid, can you tolerate this? Brat, how can you tolerate this? 9th floor asked. The 9th floor suddenly said, Kid, can you bear this? Fight her. Yi Xian said, Senior, will you come out to help? The 9th floor said, Does it have anything to do with me? Fight her. Yi Xian. At this moment, the one-legged woman turned and left. Yi Xian hesitated, but in the end, he did not choose to rush forward. That punch just now made him know that this woman's strength was definitely above Elder Gu's. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian turned and left, and soon, he arrived at the nothingness dimension. Chapter 1057. The Dimension of Nothingness. Yi Xian had to admit that he was a little afraid of this place. However, he had to give it a try. Otherwise, it would take him a few decades to reach the rebirth realm at a normal speed. A few decades and he would have to pass the 5th dimension tribulation. Yi Xian suddenly said, Senior, can you tell me a little about the dimension of nothingness now? After a moment of silence, the 9th floor replied, You will know once you enter. Yi Xian was speechless. This fellow is too afraid of death. Yi Xian shook his head. When he was about to enter, an old man suddenly appeared in front of him at this moment. The old tomb keeper. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw this person. This old man was no ordinary person. The old tomb keeper looked at Yi Xian. What are you doing? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before saying, Miss Xiao Dao asked me to come. The 9th floor, the old tomb keeper shook his head. Go back. Yi Xian thought for a moment before asking, Am I not allowed to enter? The old tomb keeper said, If it were anyone else, I would not. However, if you want to enter, I can let you. However, this place is too dangerous for you. It is not suitable for you to enter now. Yi Xian frowned. Then when is suitable for me to enter? The old tomb keeper fell silent. At this moment, the ninth floor's voice suddenly sounded. Let him in. His luck is heaven-defying. He should be fine. The old tomb keeper glanced at Yi Xian's abdomen. Are you sure? The ninth floor, ask him. Yi Xian, the old tomb keeper looked at Yi Xian. Are you sure you want to enter? Yi Xian thought for a moment before nodding. Let's go in. The old tomb keeper nodded. Then let's go in. With that, he and Yi Xian disappeared on the spot. A moment later, Yi Xian found himself in a cemetery. The sky here was dark and gloomy, and there was a bone-chilling wind blowing in the surroundings. At a glance, there were countless tombs. Yi Xian turned to look at the old man. Senior, what kind of place is this? The old man glanced at Yi Xian, shook his head, and left. Yi Xian was stunned for a moment before he hurriedly followed. Senior? Gravekeeper said, I'm a gravekeeper. Yi Xian was silent. It was obvious that the other party was unwilling to tell him. At this time, the old man said, Go to the right, there is a dry well 1,000 miles away. That is the well of reincarnation. Yi Xian wanted to ask something else, but the old man vanished without a trace. Yi Xian frowned. Leaving just like that? The ninth replied, Go. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian turned around and disappeared. He didn't go and left the void dimension. Soon, Yi Xian arrived at the Tendo pawn shop and found Xiao Dao again. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. What's wrong? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, What kind of place is that? Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. You been there? Yi Xian nodded. Xiao Dao was silent for a moment before saying, He doesn't dare to tell you. Yi Xian nodded. The little Taoist nodded slightly, then let me tell you. That place is called the Graveyard of Gods and Demons. Graveyard of Gods and Demons. Yi Xian frowned. Gods? Demons? Xiao Dao sat down and said, Before the ancient era was the era of gods and demons. Above the era of gods and demons, there was another era, the era of Tendo. She paused for a moment before continuing. The era of gods and demons was filled with true gods and demons. Yi Xian was a little taken aback. Real gods and demons? There were gods. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. Yes. Do you know why there were so many experts in the past? Because the earlier the era, the more abundant the spiritual energy was. During the era of gods and demons, the spiritual energy was at least 1,000 times more abundant than now. Even a pig could reach the rebirth state if it cultivated in that kind of environment. 1,000 times more abundant. Yi Xian's expression changed. If it was really 1,000 times more abundant, then it was too terrifying. Under such a different environment, the cultivators would definitely be different. 1,000 times. This could no longer be described as terrifying. At this time, Xiao Dao said, the people of that era were blessed by the heavens and enjoyed the blessings of the heavens. Cultivating in that kind of environment, their cultivation speed was unimaginable. Because of this, the experts of that era were extremely powerful. Saying this, she suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Don't ask me who was stronger between them and the plain-dressed woman. I don't want to beat you to death. Yi Xian, Xiao Dao continued. In that era, when some powerful beings reached their limits, from a certain perspective, they could be considered immortal. Of course, they could not be truly immortal. Yi Xian frowned. What do you mean? Xiao Dao smiled. Simply put, some people of that era, when their lifespan was about to end, they could use another method to survive. Yi Xian asked, What method? Xiao Dao blinked. Why do you know so much? Yi Xian, Xiao Dao continued. In short, the people of that era were really strong. They were so strong that rulers were everywhere. Yi Xian asked, What about the self-release realm? Xiao Dao shook her head. In that era, there were no self-release realms. There were 2 realms above rulers. When she spoke up to hear, she paused for a moment and said, the self-release realm can be said to be the highest realm of cultivation for now. Yi Xian asked, who has reached the self-release realm? Xiao Dao said calmly, you have to pay for this question. Yi Xian, Xiao Dao shook her head and said, actually, the environment is really important. Different environments create different lives. Yi Xian hesitated before asking, Miss Xiao Dao, if they were so strong in that era, why did they disappear now? Is it the 5th dimension tribulation? Xiao Dao nodded. Yes. Yi Xian frowned. The people of that era were so strong, but they couldn't resist the 5th dimension tribulation? Xiao Dao said calmly, if they could resist it, they wouldn't have to bury themselves. Yi Xian was shocked. Bury themselves? Xiao Dao nodded. Before the 5th dimension tribulation came, they had already divined it. At that time, they gathered all the powerful gods and sorcerers of that era. These people divined the 5th dimension tribulation and the future. They found that the tribulation was not something they could resist, so they used a secret technique to seal themselves and put themselves in a state of fake death. They used this method to avoid the 5th dimension tribulation and wait for an opportunity to revive. Yi Xian asked, wait for an opportunity to revive? Xiao Dao nodded. Yi Xian said, Miss Xiao Dao, did you just say that they could predict the future? Xiao Dao smiled. Don't you think it's unbelievable? Yi Xian nodded. Xiao Dao smiled. They could indeed predict the future, and they were very powerful. If it wasn't for that, they would have all died. Yi Xian shook his head. Predicting the future is too mysterious. Xiao Dao smiled. Don't doubt me. The martial arts civilization of that era was much more powerful than it is now. Of course, their so-called prediction of the future could only give a rough idea of the future. It was impossible to predict the details. But even so, it is still very powerful. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, Senior, did you say that they were waiting for an opportunity to revive? Xiao Dao nodded. Yes. Yi Xian asked, waiting for what opportunity? Xiao Dao softly said, waiting for someone who can block the 5th dimension tribulation to appear. Yi Xian was surprised, then he laughed. It can't be me, right? Xiao Dao's eyelids twitched. She looked at Yi Xian. Do you think you can do it? Yi Xian smiled. I'm just joking. Xiao Dao shook her head. The people of the God and Devil era are very powerful. If they all woke up, I don't know if it would be a good thing or a bad thing. Because for now, this era was chaotic enough. If they choose to wake up in this era, it would be even more chaotic. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Miss Xiao Dao, why do you know so much about the God and Devil era? Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. Because I was there when the God and Devil era sealed themselves. Yi Xian blinked. You were there? Xiao Dao smiled. Yes. I saw them collectively seal themselves. Yi Xian hesitated, then said, Miss Xiao Dao, aren't you afraid of the 5th dimension tribulation? Xiao Dao grinned. Why don't you guess? Yi Xian's mouth twitched. He wanted to hit someone, but he couldn't. After a while, Yi Xian asked again, Miss Xiao Dao, who are you? Xiao Dao's smile became more and more brilliant. Why don't you guess? Yi Xian was speechless. Seeing Yi Xian's unsightly expression, Xiao Dao covered her mouth and smiled. Don't guess who I am. In any case, you definitely won't be able to guess. Yi Xian nodded. Miss Xiao Dao, I won't ask you questions that you definitely won't answer. I'll ask you 2 questions that you can answer. Will the people of the God and Devil era choose to wake up in this era? Xiao Dao was silent. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Dao, waiting for her answer. At this time, Xiao Dao softly said, if they wake up in this era, it means that they feel that there are people in this era who can stop the fifth dimension tribulation. This is a good thing. However, if they wake up, it means that the world will become more chaotic. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. Don't think that you are invincible or that you can do whatever you want just because you have a powerful backer. This world isn't as simple as you think. Yi Xian was silent. At this time, Xiao Dao smiled. Actually, don't think that it's so scary. They are all in deep sleep now. If you go, it won't be that dangerous. Yi Xian suddenly said, the ninth floor is from the void dimension. In other words, he is from the legendary god and devil era? Xiao Dao shook her head. He isn't from the god and devil era. He is a bit special. Yi Xian asked, how special? The little Taoist smiled and said, ask him yourself. Yi Xian shook his head and turned to leave. This guy definitely wouldn't say anything. When he reached the door, Yi Xian suddenly stopped and turned to look at Xiao Dao. In this world, are there people from the Tendo era? Xiao Dao nodded. Yes. Moreover, you have come into contact with them. Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. P.S. Once again, I thank the readers of My Luan is Unrivaled for their donations. I also thank all the readers who donated and voted. Thank you for everyone's support. It would erupt once this month. He meant what he said. If I can't do it, I am not a man. Chapter 1058. Had contact with him? Yi Xian was dumbfounded. At this time, Xiao Dao didn't want to say anything. Yi Xian left. Watching Yi Xian leave, the Taoist in the pawnshop shook his head. This guy, at this time, the one-legged woman appeared in the pawnshop. The one-legged woman looked at Xiao Dao. Are you really going to let him go? Xiao Dao said softly, what else? The one-legged woman was silent. Xiao Dao looked at the one-legged woman and smiled. Actually, you want to see if he will succeed, don't you? The one-legged woman was silent for a while. What are you planning? Hearing this, Xiao Dao squinted his eyes. After leaving the pawnshop, Yi Xian went to the void dimension again. In the graveyard, Yi Xian walked slowly. At this time, the ninth person suddenly asked, what are you thinking about? Yi Xian said softly, Senior, who do you think Xiao Dao is? The ninth person said, she is very mysterious. Maybe only the legendary Tendo knows her true identity. Yi Xian said, she has done so many things. She must be planning something. The ninth person said, your study room. Yi Xian frowned. Then why didn't she take it from me? The ninth person sighed. Others don't know how scary you are, but she definitely knows. Not only do you have the plain-dressed woman behind you, but she is also the young master of the number one power in the fifth dimension. Even she wouldn't dare to use force on you. Yi Xian, the ninth person said, don't worry too much. In any case, she doesn't have any evil intentions towards you, right? Yi Xian nodded. My priority now is to reach the rebirth state. After saying this, he quickened his pace. Along the way, the surroundings were silent. Yi Xian kept looking around at the tombs. There were differences between the tombs. Some were big, some were small, and some had mysterious runes around them. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Senior, were you also lying in the graveyard? The ninth person smiled and said, I came out from here, but not from the fiend god age. Yi Xian blinked. What do you mean? The ninth house said, you're too curious. Yi Xian smiled. Can you tell me about it? The ninth replied, you'll find out soon enough. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. He turned his head and looked not far away. A few dozen feet away from him, there was a tomb that suddenly trembled. Seeing this, Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. What the hell? Yi Xian said solemnly, Senior. The ninth house said, I don't know what it is. Why don't we take a look together? Yi Xian was speechless. This fellow's curiosity is just as strong as mine. Yi Xian pondered for a moment and decided to take a look. Right at this time, the tomb's soil suddenly parted, and a blood-red coffin appeared in front of Yi Xian. Seeing this coffin, Yi Xian's heart shuddered. This person isn't someone to be trifled with. The ninth house said, "What are you afraid of? You have the shining dragon armor, the Summer shield, the undying body, and the undying body. Even a sovereign realm expert won't be able to kill you easily." Yi Xian thought about it for a moment. That's true. Hence, he gave up on escaping and continued to stare at the coffin. What's there to be afraid of? The coffin's lid suddenly moved to the right, and a jade-white hand slowly reached out from the coffin. A woman. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. Could it be another superwoman? From the beginning until now, he had discovered that there were more than enough superwomen in the world. At this moment, a woman slowly floated out of the coffin. She wore a snow-white dress and had a head full of silver hair that reached her buttocks. Her sleeves were shaped like a fan, and in her left hand, she held a strange staff. At the top of the staff, there was a snow-white ball. The woman's eyes were closed, but her facial features were exquisite and could cause the downfall of cities and states. Yi Xian looked at the woman, and he asked in his heart, "Senior, can you feel her aura?" The ninth house said, "No." Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but at this moment, the woman suddenly turned her head to look at Yi Xian. The corners of Yi Xian's eyes twitched, and he nodded slightly. "Hello, sir." At this moment, the woman suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian without making a sound. Yi Xian's face changed, and he gripped the executing heaven sword in his left hand. Fortunately, the woman had no intention of attacking him. At this moment, the woman suddenly spoke. Her voice was like the chirping of an oriole, very pleasant to the ear. Yi Xian blinked. "What about me?" The woman looked at Yi Xian, not the Dimension's child, but more than that. Yi Xian frowned. "Dimension's child?" The woman smiled. "Fortune-telling? The free kind." Yi Xian was taken aback. Then, he said, "Are you the legendary divine master?" The woman shook her head. "I'm a sorcerer." "A sorcerer." Yi Xian looked at the woman, and he wondered why a sorcerer wore such white clothes. The woman asked again, "Do you read my fortune?" Yi Xian was confused. "Why do you want to read my fortune?" The woman smiled. "Your fate is very strong. I've never seen anyone with such a strong fate." Yi Xian thought about it, then said, "You read my fortune." The woman nodded, and she held the staff in her hand, and gently placed it between Yi Xian's eyebrows. Boom! A white light suddenly enveloped Yi Xian, and Yi Xian frowned. At this moment, the woman raised her head slightly, and her gaze pierced through the starry sky, and it didn't take long for her gaze to arrive at the four-dimensional universe. In an unknown starry sky, a woman in a plain dress suddenly stopped, and she turned around with a gaze that was as cold as ice without a trace of emotion. In the nothingness dimension, the woman looked at the woman in the plain dress. Soon, strange and mysterious red runes appeared above the woman in the plain dress. She was reading the woman's fortune. The woman in the plain dress just looked at the woman without saying anything or resisting. A short moment later, the blood-red runes suddenly vanished without a trace. The woman suddenly opened her eyes when she saw this. Her pupils were blood-red. The woman said in disbelief, "You don't have a fate." The woman in the plain dress opened her palm, and a strand of sword light suddenly shot into the sky. In the next moment, the sword light pierced through the galaxy and arrived in the nothingness dimension. The expression of the woman in front of Yi Xian changed drastically when she saw this. At this moment, her face was filled with terror, and she seemed to have thought of something. She suddenly pounced into Yi Xian's arms. "Save me!" Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, Yi Xian was slightly stunned. Save her? In next to no time, Yi Xian understood. because a strand of sword light had appeared in his field of vision. The woman in the plain dress's sword light. She had attacked again. Yi Xian knew that the woman in front of him had definitely offended the woman in the plain dress. Should I save her? While Yi Xian was hesitating, the strand of sword light had already arrived behind the woman. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it and pulled the woman behind him. At this moment, the strand of sword light stopped and gradually vanished. The woman in Yi Xian's arms heaved a sigh of relief when she saw this scene. The woman raised her head to look at Yi Xian, and she said gently, "Thank you." Yi Xian looked at the woman. "Why did you offend her?" The woman shook her head with a slightly complicated expression. "I divined your fate. Your fate is related to her, and then I deduced it to her." When she spoke up to this point, she paused for a moment and said, "There's actually such a strong person. How terrifying." Yi Xian looked at the woman. "Are you from the era of gods and fiends?" The woman nodded. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he asked, "Was there anyone stronger than her during the era of gods and fiends?" The woman looked at Yi Xian, and she thought for a moment before she said, "I don't know her true strength." Yi Xian understood when he heard this. The woman looked at Yi Xian. "You're weaker." Yi Xian's face darkened. The woman suddenly said, "I'm called Amu, the High Priestess of the Wu clan." High Priestess? Yi Xian was startled, and then he said, "Is your status very high?" Amu didn't reply. She slowly closed her eyes, and her left hand pinched her fingers as if she was calculating something. After a moment, she said softly, "The fifth dimension tribulation is coming." Fifth dimension tribulation. Yi Xian said, "Are you all going to wake up?" Amu looked at Yi Xian, and she was curious. "What are you doing here?" Yi Xian said, "I'm looking for the well of reincarnation and the grave." Amu frowned. Grave? The well of reincarnation? Yi Xian nodded. Amu said softly, "I'll take you to the grave." After saying that, she turned around and walked away. Yi Xian hurriedly followed. He walked to Amu's side, and then he said, "Miss Amu, is the grave dangerous?" Amu said, "It's dangerous for you to go alone." Yi Xian asked, "What exactly is a grave?" Amu said softly, "A grave means death, and death means reincarnation." Yi Xian still wanted to ask something, but Amu suddenly quickened her pace. Soon, she brought Yi Xian to a dense forest. In the dense forest, there was a huge grave. Around the grave, there were all kinds of blood-red runes, and in front of the grave, there was a wordless gravestone. Yi Xian looked at Amu, and Amu said, "Go in. It can help you comprehend reincarnation." Yi Xian hesitated, and then he said, "Is it dangerous?" Amu nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian was speechless. Amu looked at Yi Xian, "Go in." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "It's dangerous." Amu said, "It's fine." Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he walked towards the grave. When he arrived in front of the grave, a powerful force suddenly swept out from it. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Bang! As soon as his sword descended, the force was directly shattered by him. However, at this moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of him, and before he could react, a fist suddenly smashed against his chest. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and in the next moment, his entire body retreated thousands of meters. As soon as he stopped, the torch dragon armor on his chest cracked open, and the body beneath it instantly cracked into a spider web. Yi Xian looked up at the grave, and there was a middle-aged man standing at the entrance. The middle-aged man suddenly disappeared, and Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. He suddenly withdrew the Sumru shield, and then he pushed it forward. The middle-aged man's fist smashed against the Sumru shield. Bang! Yi Xian was instantly sent flying with the shield, and the moment he flew out, the shield directly cracked into several pieces. Chapter 1059. After Yi Xian stopped, his expression became extremely grave. The summer's shield had been broken. Yi Xian looked up at the middle-aged man not far away. The middle-aged man wore a black robe with 2 black dragons embroidered on it. On his head, there was a pitch-black horn. The middle-aged man ignored Yi Xian and looked at a moon not far away. There was a trace of fear in his eyes. Amu retreated to Yi Xian's side. She used her arm to gently nudge Yi Xian's shoulder. "Are you all right?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, so strong. Amu nodded. "He's the sky dragon of the Celestials." Yi Xian turned to look at Amu. "Sky dragon? Demon beast?" Amu nodded. "Yes. Dragon." Yi Xian was silent. No wonder the other party was so strong. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Can you beat him?" Amu turned to Yi Xian. "I don't know how to fight." "Don't know how to fight." Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he said, "Are you sure?" Amu blinked. "The high priestess doesn't know how to fight." Yi Xian looked at Amu. Soon, he was sure. This woman really didn't know how to fight. The high priestess didn't know how to fight? Then how could she survive? At this moment, the middle-aged man not far away suddenly said, "The high priestess is of noble status in the Wu clan. Although she doesn't know how to fight, a word from her can make all the experts in the Wu clan go through fire and water for her." Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man walked slowly towards him and Amu. Amu was very direct. She hid behind Yi Xian. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. "Miss Amu, aren't you going to call some people out to help?" Amu shook his head. "They're all asleep. I can't wake them up." Yi Xian said solemnly, "I might not be able to beat them." Amu hesitated for a moment before saying, "Get that woman from before. She can beat him." A woman in a plain dress. Yi Xian was speechless. He also wanted to be called lady in plain dress. The problem was that he didn't even know where she was. Right at this moment, the middle-aged man suddenly smiled and said, "So the high priest woke up first." Amu looked at the middle-aged man. "The person beside me is not simple. If you hurt him, your celestial clan will be exterminated." The middle-aged man turned to look at Yi Xian. He sized up Yi Xian and sneered, "What a joke." As soon as he finished speaking, he punched out. Boom! A fist print swept across the field like a tsunami. The powerful pressure directly caused the surrounding space to boil. As the target of the fist print, Yi Xian immediately felt a suffocating feeling. What a powerful physical body. Yi Xian immediately put away the Sumeru shield and torch dragon armor. Soon, countless deathly auras suddenly appeared around his body. Boom! A powerful aura suddenly swept out from Yi Xian's body. At this moment, the fist print directly arrived in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not dodge and allowed the fist to strike his body. Boom! Yi Xian retreated over 100 feet. When he stopped, he was completely unharmed. Undying body. Seeing this scene, the middle-aged man in the distance frowned slightly. "Your physical body." As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian, who was in the distance, suddenly leaped up. Holding the executing heaven sword with both hands, he slashed down. The middle-aged man did not dodge and punched out. Boom! The sword light was forced to a stop. At this moment, a sword slashed down on the middle-aged man's head. Boom! The executing heaven sword trembled violently, and Yi Xian returned to his original position. Yi Xian looked at the executing heaven sword in his hand. Qingcheng, Yi family's ancestral hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as the crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi family's elders. Why? At this moment, a somewhat timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the family wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you discard him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a family matter. What are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the great elder directly. However, she did not leave, and instead mustered up her courage to enter the ancestral hall. She bowed again to the elders on both sides. "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li family over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the family, and we do not know if he is dead or alive. But now, the family is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is really unfair. Impudent." The great elder suddenly raged. "Discard him or not, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this moment, the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder said coldly, "Then flog 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi mansion rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists, and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the family for so many years, even now he is fighting for the family, and the family is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang, and he knew that his chance to show off had come. The guard sneered, "Young master Yi Lang inherits the crown prince, and it is everyone's wish. Why are you shouting?" With that, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen, but she did not cry, and only covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard, and smiled. "What is your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You are very good. After I become the crown prince, I will need 10 guards, and you will be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and quickly bowed deeply. "I will go through fire and water for the crown prince, and I will do anything for you." Yi Lang nodded slightly. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Do not show mercy, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. Immediately, he grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu saw something, and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the South Mountain. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his face was dark, not knowing what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed, and he quickly looked at Yi Lang. Just as he was about to speak, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger, and before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there, and charged towards Zhang Mu once more. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian looked up at him, and snarled, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me." Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage, and in the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be removed, and Yi Lang shall take over. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you remove him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look directly at the great elder. However, she did not leave, and instead mustered up her courage to enter the ancestral hall. She bowed again to the elders on both sides. "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan, and we do not know if he is dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to remove him from his position. This is unfair. Impudent." The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he is removed or not, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog her 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists, and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he is fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard laughed coldly. "Young Master Yi Lang is the heir, and it is the wish of everyone. What are you shouting about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard, and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and hurriedly bowed deeply. "This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince, even if it means death." Yi Lang nodded slightly. "Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show mercy, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to see something, and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang, and just as he was about to speak, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there, and charged towards Zhang Mu once more. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him, and snarled, your man? As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed, brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage, and in the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Chapter 1060. At this moment, Yi Xian hadn't completely lost his reason. Because he wasn't too angry. As long as he wasn't extremely angry, then he wouldn't allow himself to lose his reason. However, it was also because of this that he was unable to utilize the power of his bloodline to its fullest. Yi Xian's expression was solemn as he gazed at the heavenly dragon in the sky. This fellow has transformed. And he's even become so huge. How do I fight him? In the sky, the enormous dragon looked down and roared madly. Strands of dragon might swept down from the sky. Along with the appearance of the dragon might, the entire sky became illusory. Yi Xian turned to look at Amu, can you help? Amu hesitated for a moment and said, I really don't know how to fight. It's usually others who fight for me. Yi Xian was speechless. You don't know how to fight? He almost wanted to curse. Meanwhile, Amu said, however, I can help you become stronger. Yi Xian was slightly stunned, help me become stronger? Amu nodded. She walked over to Yi Xian, closed her eyes slowly, and chanted a bunch of incantations. After a short while, she suddenly tapped the center of Yi Xian's brows. In the name of the sorcerer god, I bestow upon you the power of the sorcerer god. Bang! In an instant, numerous mysterious black runes suddenly appeared on Yi Xian's face. At the same time, strands of powerful energy erupted from within his body like a volcano. Power! At this moment, Yi Xian was stunned. He felt that his body possessed boundless energy. This energy was so strong that he'd never possessed it before. Meanwhile, the dragon might in the sky had arrived. Yi Xian raised his head and punched. Rumble. The entire sky trembled violently, and the boundless dragon might instantly vanished. Yi Xian looked at his right hand. At this moment, his strength was at least 10 times stronger than before. 10 times. What sort of heaven-defying secret technique is this? Right at this moment, the heavenly dragon suddenly roared once more, and then it dove down from the sky. Yi Xian snapped out of his thoughts and stamped his right foot hard. Boom! Wherever he stomped his feet, an abyss was formed. In the sky, Yi Xian punched the sky dragon. Directly clash head-on. In front of this heavenly dragon, Yi Xian was as tiny as an ant. However, the moment he threw a punch, the heavenly dragon was forced to stop on the spot. The heavenly dragon roared, he fiercely slapped his claw towards Yi Xian, but at this time, Yi Xian suddenly roared, and punched out again. He had used his full strength in this punch. Rumble. With this punch, the heavenly dragon was forced back by Yi Xian's punch. At the same time, the dragon scales on the heavenly dragon's body exploded inch by inch. Blood splattered everywhere. It was a spectacular sight. After retreating for a full 10,000 feet, the heavenly dragon finally came to a stop. However, at this moment, his entire body was filled with cuts and bruises. In the sky, Yi Xian looked at his own fist and felt a little dazed. This power was too unreal. In the distance, the heavenly dragon looked at Yi Xian with fear in his eyes. As though he had thought of something, he suddenly looked at Amu below. Amu's eyelids twitched, and she hurriedly looked at Yi Xian. "Save me." Just as she finished speaking, the heavenly dragon suddenly swept its tail towards her. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Amu. Yi Xian was about to attack when Amu pointed at the executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand. "In the name of the sorcerer god, I bestow upon you a divine blade." Boom! The executing heaven sword suddenly trembled violently, turning from blood red to dark black. On the tip of the sword, a mysterious black light flickered. Yi Xian was stunned. In the next moment, he leaped and slashed down with his sword. Chi! In the sky, the heavenly dragon's tail was directly severed by Yi Xian's sword. Blood flowed like a waterfall, dyeing the sky red. Yi Xian was stunned. The executing heaven sword had become so strong. Yi Xian looked at the executing heaven sword in his hand, feeling a little unreal. At this moment, Amu suddenly said, "Kill him." Yi Xian looked up at the heavenly dragon. The heavenly dragon turned and ran. Clearly, it was afraid. The heavenly dragon was very fast, and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the sky. At this moment, Amu suddenly pointed at Yi Xian's back. "In the name of the sorcerer god, I bestow upon you divine speed." Boom! A mysterious force suddenly surged into Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian was stunned. In the next moment, he disappeared into the sky. About 2 breaths later, Yi Xian appeared in the sky, and in his hand, he dragged a long dragon. Yi Xian landed in front of Amu, and Amu ran to the heavenly dragon excitedly. She kicked the heavenly dragon's head. "Get up. Continue fighting. Weren't you very arrogant?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then said, "He's already dead." Amu blinked, and then said, "Pull out his dragon tendon and drink his dragon blood. Your body will become even stronger." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then said, "That's not very good, is it?" Amu was about to speak, but Yi Xian had already walked in front of the heavenly dragon and started to drain its blood. Amu was speechless. Heavenly dragon blood. In a short while, Yi Xian drained the heavenly dragon's blood and placed it in the prison pagoda. Then, he began to extract the dragon tendon. Amu watched excitedly from the side. Not only did she watch, but she also instructed Yi Xian on how to do it. "This is dragon marrow. It's very nutritious. Don't drop it. This is dragon liver. If stir-fried, it'll be very delicious. Keep it for me. This is dragon heart. After eating it, your heart will become very strong. Eat it. This is dragon's penis." Oh, Yi Xian put something away without batting an eyelid. A moment later, the heavenly dragon was cleanly dissected by Yi Xian. Then Yi Xian set up a large pot and started to stew the dragon meat. In a short while, the fragrance of meat wafted out. Amu looked at the dragon meat in the pot excitedly. "It smells very good. Unfortunately, it's not an 8-division heavenly dragon. If it was an 8-division heavenly dragon, it would definitely be more fragrant." Yi Xian looked at Amu. 8-division heavenly dragon? Amu nodded. The heavenly dragon is a member of the heavenly clan. Among the heavenly dragons, the 8-division heavenly dragon is the strongest. Look at this. He has only cultivated 2 dragon marks. Among the ancestors of the Heavenly Dragon clan, he can only be considered average. Average. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. He hesitated for a moment, and then asked. Are there many dragons in the Heavenly Dragon clan? Amu shrugged. They're all right. Just a few hundred. A few hundred. Yi Xian's expression froze. Amu looked at Yi Xian. Are you afraid? Yi Xian looked at the pot of dragon meat in front of him and said, the Heavenly Dragon clan doesn't hold grudges, right? Amu said, they're very vengeful. They're small in number, so they're especially protective. There was once a person who injured a heavenly dragon and was chased by more than 100 heavenly dragons of the Heavenly Dragon clan for decades. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then pointed at the pot of dragon meat. Has this happened before? Amu blinked. It's never happened before. Yi Xian said indifferently, anyway, they haven't woken up yet. Amu shook his head. You're wrong. Yi Xian looked at Amu. Amu said, they should be waking up soon. No, some of them are already awake. Yi Xian said, just eat one of their dragons. They won't be so petty, right? Amu looked at Yi Xian and chuckled, not saying a word. Yi Xian, Amu suddenly said, it's cooked. With that, she took out a pair of chopsticks, picked up a piece of meat and placed it in her mouth. A moment later, she slowly closed her eyes. Delicious. Saying that, she looked at Yi Xian. Aren't you going to eat? Yi Xian was silent. Amu said, are you afraid? Yi Xian said indifferently, what am I afraid of? With that, he picked up a piece of meat and placed it in his mouth. It had to be said that the taste of the dragon meat was indeed good. As if he had thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly asked, Miss Amu, is the power you gave me a secret technique? Amu said, you can say that. How is it? Is it powerful? Yi Xian said, very powerful. Can you teach me? Amu shook her head. No, only the high priest knows. Yi Xian pointed at himself. Can I be the high priest? Amu looked at Yi Xian and shook her head. No, because you don't have pure Wu clan blood. But, you can be a witch's servant. Yi Xian frowned. A witch's servant? Amu smiled. I'm the high priest's attendant. Yi Xian's expression became strange. As if knowing what Yi Xian was thinking, Amu suddenly said, hey, don't look like that. In our Wu clan, the status of a witch's servant is very, very high, second only to the Wu clan's chief and high priest. Do you know how many people in the Wu clan want to be a witch's servant? Yi Xian asked, what are the benefits of being a witch's servant? The high priest said, a witch's servant can gain great power through the high priest, just like what happened just now. Yi Xian was silent. He knew that this high priest was equivalent to a support. He could only support and had no combat power. But this support was a bit strong, speaking of which, after being strengthened by Amu, his strength was definitely not weaker than a ruler. No, it was definitely much stronger than an ordinary ruler. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and looked at Amu. Is there a more powerful secret technique? Amu nodded. Yes. But, you are still weak now. You can't withstand a more powerful secret technique. In short, if you follow me, you will have a lot of benefits. Yi Xian said, you want me to be your witch's servant? Amu blinked. Are you not willing? Yi Xian said, I don't know how to serve people. Amu smiled. I don't need you to serve me. Saying that, she looked at Yi Xian. The Wu clan has many treasures. I know where they are. Yi Xian blinked. Can I use them? And, borrow them. Borrow them. Amu smiled. If you are willing to be my witch's servant, you can use all the treasures of the Wu clan. Yi Xian suddenly asked, why do you want me to be your witch's servant? Amu blinked. Yi Xian said, "Don't lie." Amu was silent for a moment. Then, she said, "I am in danger now. I need you to protect me." Yi Xian frowned. "Very dangerous?" Amu nodded. "Logically speaking, I shouldn't have woken up at this time. But, I woke up at this time. My Wu clan's experts haven't woken up yet." Yi Xian said, "Do your Wu clan have many enemies?" Amu nodded. "Many." Saying that, she looked at Yi Xian. "I have divined for you. Your fate is very strong. If I am with you, my fate will be very strong too." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Then, have you divined that it might be dangerous to follow me?" Amu blinked. "I haven't divined it yet." Yi Xian was about to speak. At this moment, an extremely powerful dragon aura appeared in the distant horizon. Sky Dragon. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. At this moment, Amu smiled. "Don't be afraid." Hearing that, Yi Xian's heart relaxed. He looked at Amu. "Do you have a way to deal with it?" Amu smiled faintly. She picked up a piece of dragon bone and started gnawing on it. This incoming dragon should be a 4-vein dragon. A conservative estimate would be that it's at least 5 times stronger than the previous dragon. However, don't panic. This dragon's strength is far from being comparable to the girl in the plain dress behind you. Call her here. She can destroy this kind of dragon with a flick of her finger. Yi Xian looked at Amu. "Miss Amu, I want to say that I can't contact her." Amu blinked. "Are you serious?" Yi Xian nodded. "I'm very serious. And, let me tell you, I'm a little panicked now." Amu put down the dragon meat in her hand. She looked at the dragon meat in the big pot in front of her and said, "Maybe, we're a little cruel." Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1061. In front of the cauldron, the aroma of dragon meat wafted. In the sky, the dragon might was getting closer and closer. Amu suddenly got up and walked behind Yi Xian. She lay on Yi Xian's back. "Run." Yi Xian didn't hesitate at all. He got up and ran. His speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the distance. After Yi Xian and Amu left, an old man suddenly appeared in the field. When the old man saw the dragon meat in the cauldron, his face instantly turned ferocious. "No." His voice was like thunder, shaking the sky. A moment later, the old man looked up into the distance. His eyes were red, and his expression was twisted. Stewed. The heavenly dragon clan had never suffered such humiliation. "Ah!" The old man suddenly roared. In the next moment, he directly rushed out. In the distance, Yi Xian carried Amu on his back and ran wildly. On the way, Yi Xian said, "Miss Amu, did none of your Wu clan experts wake up?" Amu looked around and shook her head. "No." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Then why did you wake up?" After a moment of silence, Amu glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. At this moment, a powerful dragon might suddenly came from behind. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's face changed. "It's coming." Yi Xian sped up. However, the dragon might was getting closer and closer. Obviously, the other party's speed was faster than his. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Miss Amu, do you have a way?" Amu glanced behind her, then slowly closed her eyes. She silently chanted an incantation. After a moment, she suddenly pointed at the back of Yi Xian's head. "In the name of the sorcerer god, I bestow you with divine speed." Boom! In an instant, Yi Xian's speed suddenly increased. This time, his speed increased by at least 10 times. When his speed increased, Yi Xian suddenly felt a tearing pain all over his body. The speed was too fast, so fast that even his immortal body found it hard to resist. Yi Xian was a little shocked. He had to say that Amu's ability was too terrifying. Soon, he discovered that he had shaken off the heavenly dragon behind him. Behind him, the old man suddenly stopped. He looked at Yi Xian, who had already disappeared, and his expression was incomparably savage. After a while, he suddenly roared out in rage, and a series of dragon roars reverberated through the sky. In the distance, Yi Xian, who heard the dragon roar, suddenly asked, "What is he doing?" Amu hesitated for a moment before saying, "He's calling for a dragon." "Call it a dragon." Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. "Did I poke a hornet's nest?" Amu nodded. "Heavenly dragon race once faced the most, you stewed their dragon. To the heavenly dragon race, this is a humiliation, an unprecedented humiliation. If you were to fall into their hands, you would be in deep trouble." Yi Xian said, "You also ate their dragon meat." Amu blinked, then said, "We can't fall into their hands." Yi Xian nodded. He increased his speed once again, and not long later, he arrived at a valley. Above the valley, dark clouds covered the sky, and within the valley, there was a gust of wind. It was obvious that this was not a good place. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then turned around and left. Amu suddenly said, "What are you doing?" Yi Xian said, "This place is not a good place, let's change places." Amu said, "There's no danger." Yi Xian asked, "Are you sure?" Amu looked at the valley and nodded, "No." Yi Xian nodded slightly. He carried Amu to the depths of the valley. In the depths of the valley, he saw some bones. Yi Xian glanced at the bones, then said, "Miss Amu, you have to wake up your Wu clan experts." Amu said, "They have to wake up on their own." Qingcheng, Yi family, ancestral temple. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as the heir will be removed and Yi Lang will inherit it. The one who spoke was an old man dressed in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi mansion's elders. "Why?" At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral temple. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the ancestral temple, asking timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the heir, why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave." Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince." Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged, "Whether or not he is crippled, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new heir, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder coldly replied, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi Mansion's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists. "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, even at this moment, the clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new heir, Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of heir, it is the wish of everyone. What are you shouting about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and Yiling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen, but she did not cry. She only held her cheek tightly. Yiling looked at the guard, smiled and said, "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince." Yiling nodded. "You are very good. After I become the crown prince, I will need 10 personal guards. From now on, you will be my personal guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He quickly bowed deeply. "This subordinate will go through fire and water for the crown prince. I will do anything for you." Yiling nodded slightly. "Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Do not show mercy, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yiling, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yiling's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu did not know what he saw, but he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the ancestral hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who rushed back from Nanshan Hill. Seeing Yi Xian, Yiling's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder squinted his eyes, his face was dark, and no one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yiling, and was about to speak, when Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu's head spun, and he stumbled and fell. Yiling did not stop there, and he rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yiling suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yiling's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yiling. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yiling. On both sides, there were the elders of the Yi clan. "Why?" At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yiling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yiling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yiling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and asked timidly, "Great elder, my brother, Yi Xian, is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yiling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting for? Leave." Yiling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the great elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. Once again, she bowed to the elders. "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan for the rights to the mine. He is fighting for the clan, and it is unknown whether he is dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged, whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists, and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the prince's position, and it's everyone's wish. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard, and said with a smile, "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "This subordinate, Zhang Mu, greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded, "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 personal guards. From now on, you'll be my personal guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through water and tread on fire for the prince, even if it means death. Yi Lang nodded, "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall, do not hold back." Understood. Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Within the ancestral hall, all the elders began to frown. The great elder's eyes narrowed, and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, barking, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Chapter 1062. Delicious? Yi Xian wanted to die. Was this woman crazy? He might not even be able to defeat a heavenly dragon. Moreover, there were still so many of them here. And at this time, this woman was still thinking about eating? Were all the high priests so heartless? Opposite Yi Xian, the Sky Dragon Elder's gaze was fixed on Amu. His eyes were filled with fear. High Priest. He naturally knew how terrifying the Wu clan's high priest was. This kind of person was like a god in the Wu clan. With just a word from her, she could make countless Wu clan members die for her. It could be said that the high priest's position in the Wu clan was even higher than the clan leader. This was because every clan leader had to be personally appointed by the high priest, and only the clan leader who was recognized by the high priest was legal. At this moment, the Sky Dragon Elder said softly, "High priest is well." Amu nodded, "You too." The Sky Dragon Elder looked at Amu with a sinister expression, "High priest, although my Tian clan and the Wu clan are enemies, we have always respected each other. Today, the high priest killed my Sky Dragon clan Sky Dragon and even pulled out his tendons, skinned him, and let him bleed in a big pot. Isn't this too much?" Although his voice was calm, Yi Xian could feel the anger in his heart. Very angry. Amu blinked, then pointed at Yi Xian and said, "He did it, I just ate a little meat." Hearing this, Yi Xian almost collapsed. He was sold just like that? Hearing Amu's words, the Sky Dragon Elder turned to look at Yi Xian. He just looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. However, the surrounding temperature suddenly dropped. Yi Xian looked at the Sky Dragon Elder. "I am from the Sword Sect. Have you heard of the Sword Sect?" The Sky Dragon Elder said, "Never heard of it." Never heard of it? Yi Xian was taken aback before he turned to look at Amu. Amu said softly, "I've never heard of it either." "Is it famous?" Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, the Heavenly Dragon Old Man suddenly said sinisterly, "Human, what enmity does my Heavenly Dragon race have with you? What enmity do you have with me? You actually did this?" Yi Xian nodded and said, "Since you asked, then I'll tell you. The heavens pity me, it was your Heavenly Dragon race's dragon who made the first move. If you don't believe me, you can ask the High Priest." Amu quickly nodded. "That's right. Your dragon attacked first." The old man looked at Yi Xian. "It's your honor for my Heavenly Dragon race to make a move on you, do you understand?" Yi Xian blinked his eyes, then laughed. "Since you say that, then I can only say that it is your Heavenly Dragon race's honor to be eaten by the two of us." Amu hurriedly nodded. "I think that makes sense." Yi Xian, the old man looked at Yi Xian and laughed sinisterly. "You sure know how to use your tongue. I hope that your strength can be as sharp as your mouth." With that, he was about to attack, but at this moment, Amu suddenly said, "Hey." The dragons looked at Amu. Amu blinked his eyes and said, "Old man, you know that I can tell fortunes, right?" The old man looked at Amu without saying a word. Amu said seriously, "Old man, I'm telling you very, very seriously, if you touch him, you and your Heavenly Dragon race will be doomed eternally." Saying that, she pointed at Yi Xian. "Do you know who he is?" The old man said sinisterly, "Even if he is the patriarch of your Wu clan, my Heavenly Dragon race will not rest until he is dead." Amu hurriedly said, "Calm down." The old man looked at Amu and said, "What else do you want to say?" Amu said in a deep voice, "Old man, you have to understand, it was your Heavenly Dragon race who made the first move. This is the evil cause created by your Heavenly Dragon race. If you still want to make a move now, let me tell you, this evil cause will implicate your entire Heavenly Dragon race, and even the Tian clan." As she spoke, she hurriedly pulled Yi Xian to his side. Then, he said, "Look at him, do you think he's an ordinary person? Take a closer look." Yi Xian, the old man looked at Yi Xian, and as he looked, he suddenly said, "I can't tell." With that, he punched out. Yi Xian's expression changed. He immediately pulled Amu behind him and activated his undying body. Boom! With this punch, Yi Xian, along with Amu, retreated several hundred meters. But fortunately, he was able to withstand this punch. After Yi Xian stopped, Amu pointed at the back of his head. "In the name of the sorcerer god, I grant you divine speed, run." Yi Xian did not hesitate at all as he turned around and ran. Yi Xian's speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the distance. Behind him, the old man was stunned. He never thought that Yi Xian would be fine after taking a punch from him. This body was even stronger than the heavenly dragon races. But he quickly understood that this was definitely not because of his physical body. It must have been caused by some secret technique. The old man said in a deep voice, "Chase. Chase to the ends of the earth." With that, he took the lead and rushed out. Boom! Behind Yi Xian, several waves of dragon might swept across the sky. At the end of the distance, Yi Xian had raised his speed to the limit. He was definitely unable to defeat those sky dragons, so he could only run. Fortunately, he had a Mu with him. In terms of speed, those sky dragons were temporarily unable to catch up to him. After a while, Yi Xian turned around and saw that those sky dragons were still in hot pursuit. Yi Xian's face sank when he saw this scene, and then he said, "Miss Amu, do you have a way?" Amu took a deep breath, and then she patted her chest and said, "She's called the woman in a plain dress. Let me tell you, she's very formidable. She can chop off the heads of those dragons behind her with a single strike of her sword." Yi Xian's face darkened. "I know she's formidable, but I can't contact her." "Why don't you help me contact her?" Amu hurriedly shook her head. No, she doesn't seem like a reasonable person. If I forcefully go look for her, I'm afraid I'll be killed." Yi Xian said, "With me around, she won't kill you." Amu still shook her head. "It really won't do. The secrets of such a person can't be spied on at will. If I want to find her, I can only spy on the secrets of the heavens. If I do that, I'll pay a terrible price. Moreover, that woman is extremely indifferent to life. Do you know that if it weren't for you, that sword strike from before could have destroyed this place? She's too terrifying." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, "Is she as formidable as the witch god that you speak of?" Amu fell silent for a moment before she said, "I don't know for now." "For now?" Yi Xian asked again, "For now? What do you mean?" Amu said, "I don't know if that strike was executed casually or with her full strength. So, I'm unable to know her true strength." As she spoke, she lowered her head to look at Yi Xian. "Who is she to you?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "She can be considered my relative." Amu immediately smiled and said, "Very good." Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "What's good about it?" Amu said, "You and I have a life and death contract. She is your relative, which means she is also my relative. Well, it feels good to have a relative." Yi Xian's face darkened. He felt like he had been tricked. At this moment, Amu said, "Let's go to the ruins of the Witch Kingdom." As she spoke, she pointed to the right. "That way." Yi Xian nodded and sprinted to the right. After arriving at the void dimension, Yi Xian realized that this place was not just big. Behind him, the few sky dragons were still chasing wildly. On the way, Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Miss Amu, is the witch god really there?" Amu nodded, "Yes. The witch god is very powerful." Yi Xian said, "Are you familiar with the witch god?" Amu smiled and said, "Very familiar, but the witch god only exists in faith." Yi Xian still wanted to ask something, but at this moment, Amu suddenly pointed into the distance. "We're here." Yi Xian lifted his head and looked. Not far away from him, there was an ancient city. The ancient city was desolate and there was no sign of human habitation. Yi Xian increased his speed and brought Amu into the ancient city. He put Amu down and said, "At most, the dragons will catch up to us in 10 breaths." Amu smiled and said, "I have a matrix." After she finished speaking, she suddenly waved her hands and chanted an incantation. After a moment, the entire ancient city suddenly trembled. At this moment, the few sky dragons suddenly appeared in the sky above Shaman City. Just as they were about to enter the city, a huge screen of light suddenly appeared above Shaman City. Boom! Boom! The sky dragons were blocked by the screen of light. The leader of the sky dragons suddenly roared and crashed into the screen of light. Boom! The screen of light and the entire shaman city trembled, but the screen of light did not shatter. When he saw this, Yi Xian instantly let out a sigh of relief. The matrix was still useful. At this moment, a moose suddenly said, "This matrix can't last for long. I'll bring you to a place. Let's go." Once she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Yi Xian turned his head to look at the sky dragons. They were still crashing into the matrix. At this moment, the old sky dragon seemed to have noticed Yi Xian's gaze. He stopped and looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian grinned, then raised his index finger and beckoned, "Come here." When he heard this, the old sky dragon's expression instantly turned ferocious. He crashed into the screen of light, and the screen of light trembled once again. However, it still did not shatter, but there were already fine cracks on it. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw this, and then he turned around and left. In next to no time, Yi Xian followed a moo to arrive before an ancient hall. In the sky above the hall were the heads of some unknown demon beasts. A moo led Yi Xian into the hall, and the hall was filled with numerous strange red runes. Yi Xian looked at Amu. "Miss Amu, why did you bring me here?" Amu didn't speak. She walked to a wall and chanted something silently. In next to no time, the wall suddenly opened up, and then she turned to look at Yi Xian. "Follow me." Once she finished speaking, she walked in. Yi Xian followed. In next to no time, the two of them arrived at a secret chamber. There was a statue of a woman in the secret chamber, and there was an incense burner before the woman. Beneath the incense burner were the heads of some mysterious demon beasts. Amu turned to look at Yi Xian. "I want to transform you." "Transform myself?" Yi Xian was taken aback, and then he said, "Miss Amu, what do you mean?" Amu said, "You can't go to a place like a tomb. However, I can make you stronger in another way." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "There won't be any side effects, right?" Amu shook her head. "No. Come, take off your clothes. And, take them off cleanly." Yi Xian's expression was a little strange. "Miss Amu, you can't be thinking of dual cultivation with me, right?" I'm not a casual person, really." As he spoke, he had already started to take off his clothes. Amu. P.S. Thank you to all the readers for your recent support. Your gifts have flattered me, and also made me feel a little ashamed. Such updates, such gifts, for the first time, I feel that I'm not human. During the new year, I really can't write at home every day, and I also want to relax. Let me tell you, I've been writing on New Year's Eve. Actually, the main reason is because I'm poor. Being poor makes me not dare to slack off in the slightest. In short, thank you to all the parents who support me. Chapter 1063. What are you thinking? Amu rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. I want to transform your body. Not dual cultivation. Yi Xian's face turned red. He had misunderstood. Amu continued, your body is very strong, but it's not strong enough. Yi Xian said in a low voice, you want to improve my body? Amu nodded. Yes. If you want to improve your realm, you can only go to the tomb or the well of samsara. But you can't go to those two places for now, so I can only help you improve your body. Yi Xian asked, how do I improve it? Amu said, take off your clothes. Take them off cleanly. Yi Xian was speechless. Amu blinked. Are you shy? Shy? Hearing Amu's words, Yi Xian immediately took off his clothes. Soon, he was completely naked. Amu sized up Yi Xian's body and said, lie down. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then lay down on the ground. Amu opened her palm, and a black brush appeared in her hand. Then, she began to draw on Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian looked at Amu. Miss Amu, what are you drawing? Amu said, talisman. Yi Xian asked, what talisman? I'm also proficient in runes. Amu glanced at Yi Xian. Sorcerer talisman. Yi Xian asked again, is the sorcerer god still alive? Amu nodded. Still alive. Yi Xian continued to ask, is there a god on the side of the celestials? Amu said, there's one. He's also very powerful. Saying that, she paused and then said, but he's not as powerful as the sorcerer god. Yi Xian was speechless. Amu suddenly said, do you know Tendo? Yi Xian said, Supreme Tendo? Amu nodded. Yi Xian asked, Ji Dao Yi Dian Dian, what's wrong? Amu said softly, if you meet this woman in the future, you have to be careful. She's sneaky. Yi Xian frowned. You've been tricked by her? Amu nodded. Yes. Yi Xian asked, did you take revenge on her? Amu's hand paused for a moment before he said, I don't dare to retaliate. Yi Xian asked, is the Tendo very strong? Amu nodded. Yi Xian said gravely, Miss Amu, did you fall into a deep sleep to avoid the fifth dimension? Amu said, yes. Yi Xian said, I heard that in your era, the spiritual energy was extremely abundant and there were many strong people. Could you not fight against the fifth dimension? Amu said softly, we couldn't. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Why? Amu sighed. That tribulation is not simple. Yi Xian wanted to say something, but at this time, Amu suddenly touched a certain place. Yi Xian shuddered. Miss Amu, do you want to draw this place? Amu glanced at Yi Xian. Of course. Yi Xian hesitated and then said, aren't you shy? Amu curled her lips. Isn't it just a few taels of meat? What's there to be shy about? After that, she continued to draw. If Amu wasn't shy, then Yi Xian naturally wouldn't be shy. In any case, he wouldn't suffer any losses. At this moment, Amu suddenly said, don't be hard. Yi Xian, Amu frowned. Can you not be so hard? Go soft. Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. This woman, Amu looked at Yi Xian. Can you go soft? Yi Xian said gravely, Miss Amu, this is not something I can control. Amu frowned slightly. She looked at something. After a moment, she nodded. I understand. This is an instinctive reaction of the human body. If it's hard, then let it be hard. After that, she continued to draw. Yi Xian, about an hour later, Yi Xian discovered that his entire body was covered in those strange red runes. At first glance, he didn't look like a human at all. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Miss Amu, how am I supposed to meet people like this? Amu said, don't worry, it'll disappear soon. After saying that, she continued to draw. Yi Xian turned his head to take a look. At this moment, he could hear the sound of the heavenly dragon race striking the formation. The heavenly dragon race really didn't plan on letting him go. At this moment, Amu suddenly put down her brush and said, come, follow me. After saying that, she stood up and walked outside. Just as Yi Xian was about to put on his clothes, Amu suddenly said, don't. Yi Xian, just like that, Amu brought Yi Xian outside. Above their heads, the heavenly dragon race and the other experts were still crazily attacking the formation, and the cracks on the formation were increasing. Amu took a look at the formation, then brought Yi Xian to a well. Yi Xian looked at the well. It was filled to the brim with blood. Yi Xian turned his head to look at Amu. Amu said softly, jump in. Yi Xian blinked, just like that? Amu nodded, in my Wu clan, only those who have made great contributions can enter this well. You can go in and absorb it. Yi Xian nodded and jumped in. After entering the well of blood, the blood around him immediately boiled. At this moment, a moose suddenly chanted an incantation. Gradually, a mysterious power appeared in the well. Inside the well, Yi Xian frowned slightly. He felt something enter his body. A moose said, "Don't resist. This is the power of the sorcerer god. I will use the power of the sorcerer god to forcefully temper your body. It will hurt a little later." As soon as she said that, Yi Xian felt as if his entire body was in pain. Fortunately, this bit of pain was nothing to him. After about an hour, a moo's body suddenly floated into the air. She closed her eyes and opened her hands. Sorcerer god. He's too weak. Make his physical body a little stronger. Please. After saying that, she held the staff in her hand and pointed at the well of blood. Boom! A powerful force suddenly surged into the blood well. In an instant, the entire blood well trembled violently. Down below, Yi Xian's body swelled up as streams of powerful force surged into his body. Yi Xian was a little shocked. "Senior, what is this power?" "The power of the sorcerer god." Yi Xian asked, "Do you know anything about the sorcerer god?" "I don't. But it seems like the sorcerer god isn't simple. The high priestess isn't simple either." Yi Xian nodded. Actually, he still wasn't sure if a moo really didn't know how to fight. At this moment, a moose suddenly said, "Rise." As soon as she said that, Yi Xian floated out of the well. Yi Xian looked at his body and saw that the blood-red runes were gradually disappearing. A moo floated in front of Yi Xian and sized up Yi Xian. "How do you feel now?" Yi Xian closed his eyes slowly. He felt a powerful force flowing through his body. After a moment, he clenched his fists. Boom! The sky shook violently, and the space within thousands of feet cracked. Yi Xian looked at his body excitedly. "Do I have the invincible golden body now?" A moose shook his head. "Not really. It's only a half-step invincible golden body." Yi Xian frowned. "Half-step?" A moo nodded. "To achieve the true invincible golden body, you still need to undergo nirvana." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "How do I undergo nirvana?" A moo said in a low voice, "As far as I know, there are 2 ways. The first is to cultivate it yourself. The second is to use external objects." Yi Xian asked, "What external objects?" A moo said, "The blood of a true phoenix can allow one to undergo nirvana and become invincible." Yi Xian continued to ask, "Where does the true phoenix do it?" A moo glanced at Yi Xian. "There is only one true phoenix in this world now." Yi Xian frowned. "Why so few?" A moo shook his head. When the true Phoenix clan's boss underwent nirvana rebirth, she caused too much of a commotion. Her flames swept for hundreds of thousands of miles and killed countless living beings. That's not all. She didn't know how to restrain herself and released her flames in a frenzy. In the end, the flames spread to Tendo Star Region's Tendo Mountain. Yi Xian asked, "Has the Tendo made a move?" A moo shook his head. "Not yet. However, there was a divine thunder that descended at that time. The appearance of this divine thunder meant that the Tendo was warning her. Unfortunately, she had just undergone nirvana rebirth at that time. Her strength was unprecedentedly strong and she was extremely arrogant. Then, she pointed at the heavens and said something like, "If the heavens don't obey me, I will defy the heavens." This was tantamount to a declaration of war against the Tendo Mountain. Thus, a divine thunder fell on the true Phoenix clan. The true Phoenix who had just undergone nirvana was blasted into pieces. Not only her, but the rest of the true Phoenix clan were also not spared. All of them were buried in the divine thunder. Yi Xian was speechless. It was easy to cause problems when one was arrogant. At this moment, a moo said, "Actually, that true Phoenix who underwent nirvana rebirth did not die completely. Her soul is still there. It's just that she is imprisoned by the chains of Tendo." Yi Xian said, "Can't she escape?" A moo shook his head. She can't escape. No one dares to save her because it was the Tendo who imprisoned her. The Tendo wants to imprison her forever. Speaking of which, she is quite pitiful. However, who asked her to go around shouting about defying the heavens? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before saying, in your era, are the consequences of shouting about defying the heavens very serious? Amu looked at Yi Xian. It's not very serious. It's very, very serious. Yi Xian nodded. It seemed like this defying the heavens should not speak carelessly in the future. If he were to offend that Tendo, the gains would not make up for the losses. Amu suddenly said, if you want to achieve the indestructible golden body, other than cultivating slowly on your own, the only way is to find that imprisoned heavenly phoenix. Yi Xian asked, where is that heavenly phoenix? Amu said, in Heavenly Phoenix Mountain. That place is now a volcano. She is imprisoned in the depths. Saying that, she looked at Yi Xian. You can't really be thinking of finding her, right? Let me tell you, don't think that way. Saving her means that you will be tainted by the Tendo's karma. Moreover, it might be a bad karma. Once you offend the Tendo, she will plot against you and kill you. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. Just as he was about to speak, a loud noise suddenly came from the distant horizon. Yi Xian and Amu looked up. The great array in the horizon had already shattered. In the horizon, the heavenly dragon elder stared at Yi Xian and said fiercely, human ant, have you thought about how you will die? Yi Xian turned to look at Amu. Can I beat him now? Amu hesitated for a moment before saying, maybe, you can. Yi Xian. Chapter 1064. Could he beat them? Yi Xian did not know either. Although his strength had greatly improved, the heavenly dragon elder was a 4-marked heavenly dragon. Previously, he had to use his bloodline power to fight a 2-marked heavenly dragon. One could imagine how terrifying a 4-marked heavenly dragon was. Of course, the problem now was that he had to fight even if he could not beat them. Yi Xian looked at the heavenly dragon elder. 1-on-1. The heavenly dragon elder said angrily, 1-on-1? Are you thinking too much? Then he and the heavenly dragons behind him dashed toward Yi Xian, who was down there. A group fight. Seeing this, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. This guy did not want to fight 1-on-1. Without any hesitation, he turned and ran with Amu on his back. He was not even confident of beating one heavenly dragon, let alone so many. After his physical body became stronger, his speed had also increased significantly. However, he still needed Amu's help to increase his speed. Seeing Yi Xian run, the heavenly dragon elder was stunned for a moment before he said angrily, after him. With that, he and the heavenly dragons behind him disappeared at the end of the horizon. On the way, Yi Xian asked, Senior Amu, is there a safer place? Amu thought for a moment and said, no. Yi Xian was speechless. Amu suddenly said, can't you beat them? Yi Xian's face darkened. Don't you know whether I can beat them or not? Amu smiled sheepishly. I thought you could beat them. Yi Xian was speechless. As if thinking of something, he suddenly asked, are the high priest's mega servants very strong? Amu nodded. The high priest's servants are basically the strongest in the Wu clan. Yi Xian asked, did you have servants in the past? Amu shook his head. No. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Why not? Amu said, I didn't find a suitable one. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Miss Amu, am I the weakest among all the witch's servants? Amu said, yes. Yi Xian was puzzled. Then why did you choose me? Amu said, I find you pleasing to the eye. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, the heavenly dragons behind him suddenly sped up. Sensing this, Yi Xian's expression changed. He sped up and looked around. He knew that he couldn't stay here any longer. We have to leave. Soon, Yi Xian arrived at the exit of the void dimension. At that moment, he saw the old tomb guard. The old tomb guard glanced at Amu but did not say anything. Yi Xian looked at the tomb keeper. Senior, save me. The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, we're not very familiar with each other. Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, a terrifying pressure suddenly came from behind him. It's here. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched, and he looked at the old man. The old man pointed at the exit. Run. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. He didn't hesitate to flee. Meanwhile, Elder Tianlong and the other heavenly dragons descended in front of the old man. Elder Tianlong looked at the old man and said furiously, why did you let him leave? The old man frowned slightly and flicked his sleeve. Bang! Old man Tianlong was sent flying. This time, he flew more than 10,000 feet away. When he stopped, there was a palm print on his face. The expressions of the heavenly dragons changed drastically when they saw this scene. Elder Tianlong was slightly stunned as well. He looked at the old man. Who are you? The old man didn't say a word before he turned around and left. Elder Tianlong fell silent for a moment before he said, chase after that human youth. As soon as he finished speaking, he and the heavenly dragons by his side gave chase. After they left the void dimension, Yi Xian ran madly with Amu on his back. His face instantly fell when he sensed the heavenly dragons chasing after him. These fellows really intend to fight him to the death. Yi Xian sped up. Meanwhile, Amu suddenly said, where are you going? Yi Xian said, to get help. Amu blinked. Who are you looking for? Yi Xian said, a very formidable fellow. As soon as he finished speaking, he sped up once more. It didn't take long for him to arrive at the Endless City, and the heavenly dragons entered it as well. At the distant riverside, the one-legged woman who was washing clothes suddenly raised her head, and it didn't take long for her to frown. The troublemaker is here again. As soon as she finished speaking, she vanished on the spot. Yi Xian arrived at the pawn shop with Amu on his back. However, it was empty. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings and said, Miss Xiao Dao, are you there? There was no response. Yi Xian's face darkened. Where did this fellow run off to again? At this moment, several powerful auras suddenly enveloped the Tendo pawn shop. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. It was too late to escape now. Beside Yi Xian, Amu asked softly, is this place safe? Yi Xian hesitated for a while, then said, perhaps. He felt a little uneasy without Xiao Dao around. The people from the Endless City didn't dare to make a move here, but the heavenly dragons weren't from the Endless City. They came from the void dimension and might not even know of Xiao Dao's existence and strength. At this moment, the heavenly dragons appeared outside the pawn shop. Just as the heavenly dragon elder was about to enter, he suddenly raised his head and looked at the signboard of the pawn shop. Tendo pawn shop? The heavenly dragon elder was stunned. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was in the pawn shop, suddenly sneered, do you know what this place is? This is the Tendo pawn shop. Tendo, do you know? Tendo. The heavenly dragon elder looked at Yi Xian. Tendo can't be in this place. After saying that, he punched out fiercely. Yi Xian's expression changed. He pulled Amu behind him and threw a punch as well. Boom! In an instant, Yi Xian retreated explosively, and then he crashed heavily into the counter behind him. The Sky Dragon Elder also retreated several hundred feet. Both of them were stunned. Because they realized that the pawn shop was still there, undamaged. Seeing this, Amu's eyes flashed with astonishment. Outside the door, the heavenly dragon elder's expression suddenly turned grave. He was very clear about his own strength. The strength of that punch should have turned the small pawn shop into ashes, but he didn't expect the pawn shop to be undamaged. Not simple. The heavenly dragon elder was slightly more vigilant. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Old man, do you want to fight one-on-one? Let's fight one-on-one." The heavenly dragon elder looked at Yi Xian. "Why should I fight one-on-one with you? If you're so capable, call for help as well." The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched when he heard that. This fellow. At this moment, the heavenly dragon elder suddenly charged into the pawn shop, and there were a few more heavenly dragons behind him. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. He was about to launch an attack when a woman showed up in front of him. It was none other than the one-legged woman. The one-legged woman looked at the heavenly dragon elder and the other dragons that charged in, and she punched. Boom! The heavenly dragon elder and the others were blasted away before they could even react. Yi Xian was shocked when he saw that. That woman is so strong. Outside the pawn shop, the heavenly dragon elder and the others stopped, and his eyes were filled with seriousness as he gazed at the one-legged woman. "Who are you?" The one-legged woman paid no attention to the heavenly dragon elder, and she turned to look at Yi Xian instead. "Leave this place." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "I won't." Amu was speechless. The one-legged woman frowned slightly, and she clenched her right fist slowly. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "I'm here to look for Miss Xiao Dao." The one-legged woman spoke indifferently, "She doesn't want to see you." Yi Xian frowned. "Why?" The one-legged woman's face was expressionless. She said that she'll definitely cause great trouble once she goes to the void dimension. She doesn't want to interfere in other people's business, so she ran away. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he heard that, and he shook his head and sighed, "Alas, I never expected that Miss Xiao Dao would think of me as such a person." The one-legged woman gazed at Yi Xian. "Aren't you the same? You can't do anything, but you're number one in causing trouble." Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, the heavenly dragon elder suddenly said, "Your Excellency, this is between me and him. Please don't interfere." The one-legged woman turned to look at the heavenly dragon elder. "What kind of trash are you?" Yi Xian was stunned. This woman's temper wasn't ordinary. In the distance, the heavenly dragon elder's face was a little gloomy. "The old man is a dragon general of the heavenly dragon clan. Your Excellency, the heavenly dragon clan only wants to kill that Yi Xian and that woman. This has nothing to do with you, so please don't invite trouble for yourself." The one-legged woman looked at the heavenly dragon elder. "This is my territory." The heavenly dragon elder narrowed his eyes. "Your Excellency, are you really going to interfere?" The one-legged woman was expressionless. "If you don't scram, do you believe that I won't stew you?" "Stew?" The heavenly dragon elder was instantly infuriated. He suddenly leaped up and smashed his fist down towards the one-legged woman. The one-legged woman's expression was calm, but a strand of cold light flickered in her eyes. Suddenly, she smashed her fist forward, and the space in front of her instantly transformed into a strange vortex. Rumble. The heavenly dragon elder was instantly blasted over 1 kilometer away. As soon as he stopped, his right hand split open and fresh blood sprayed. The expressions of the other dragons from the heavenly dragon clan instantly changed when they saw this scene. Yi Xian was slightly shocked as well. This woman's strength was actually so terrifying. In the distance, the heavenly dragon elder glanced at his right hand with slight disbelief. He knew his body very well, yet he hadn't expected that his body would be blasted apart by a single punch from this human woman. How much strength did one have to possess to accomplish that? At this moment, the fear in the heavenly dragon elder's heart increased. The one-legged woman glanced at the heavenly dragon elder, and the latter's expression changed. However, the one-legged woman didn't attack. Instead, she turned around to look at Yi Xian. "Leave this place." Yi Xian blinked, and then he said, "I won't." The one-legged woman said angrily, "Leave this place." Yi Xian pulled a moo and took a step back, and then he said, "I won't." The one-legged woman suddenly clenched her right hand tightly, and Yi Xian fell to the ground. "I won't leave. You hit me. Unless you beat me to death, otherwise, I won't leave." The one-legged woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "This is my place. Yi Xian closed his eyes. I'm not leaving. Hit me. The one-legged woman stared at Yi Xian. As a person, you can't be so shameless. P.S. Everyone, try your best not to go out and vote more. Chapter 1065. Face. That thing was just a piece of skin to him, Yi Xian. It was completely useless. If he left the endless underground city now, he would be beaten up by these sky dragons. He was not that foolish. Not leaving. Just not leaving. Seeing Yi Xian acting shamelessly, the one-legged woman's face was very gloomy. She really wanted to beat Yi Xian to death. However, she also knew that this fellow could not die here. Otherwise, the matter would be even more serious. However, if this fellow did not leave, there would be no peaceful days in the endless underground city. The one-legged woman looked at Yi Xian just like that. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, I'll just stay for a year. I'll leave after a year. Is that all right? The one-legged woman raised a finger. 1 day. Yi Xian hurriedly said, half a year. The one-legged woman looked at Yi Xian. 1 day. Yi Xian wanted to say something, but the one-legged woman's right hand slowly clenched tightly. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian hurriedly said, 3 days. I'll leave after 3 days. If you're still unwilling, then beat me to death. The one-legged woman looked at Yi Xian just like that and did not speak. Yi Xian knew that this woman definitely wanted to beat him to death. Right at this moment, the one-legged woman suddenly said, 3 days later, you leave. With that said, she turned and left. Seeming to have thought of something, she looked at that sky dragon old man. Scram. The sky dragon old man looked at the one-legged woman. If you have the capabilities, beat me to death. Yi Xian, right at this moment, the one-legged woman suddenly vanished from the spot. The sky dragon old man's expression changed drastically. He punched out fiercely. He used all his strength in this punch. The instant the punch was punched out, a powerful fist seal instantly enveloped the one-legged woman. Under this fist seal, the space around the one-legged woman was directly annihilated. At this time, the one-legged woman also punched out. Head on. This punch of hers crumbled the sky dragon old man's fist seal instantly. Immediately after, her fist landed directly on the sky dragon old man's chest. Puff. A mouthful of blood sprayed from Elder Tianlong's mouth, and then his figure was blasted flying. Meanwhile, the one-legged woman suddenly pressed forward, and Elder Tianlong's face was blasted by her fist before he could even react. Bang! The heavenly dragon elder spat out another mouthful of blood essence, his entire face deforming. At that moment, the other heaven dragons suddenly attacked. The one-legged woman's eyes turned cold when she saw the heavenly dragons take action. She suddenly stretched out her right hand and a powerful force suddenly gathered in her palm. In an instant, she slammed it in front of her and a black light suddenly erupted from her palm like a volcano. Rumble. Before the few heavenly dragons that were near her could react, they were sent flying by the powerful force. Blood splattered in the air. Because the bodies of those heavenly dragons had all split open. The corners of Yi Xian's eyes twitched when he saw this. This woman is extraordinarily strong. He was very clear about the defensive capabilities of these heavenly dragons, but this woman could easily break through their physical bodies. What did this mean? It meant that her strength far surpassed the heavenly dragons. At this moment, the one-legged woman suddenly appeared in front of the heavenly dragon elder. Before the latter could react, she slapped his head. Bang! Elder Tianlong was blasted flying again, but the one-legged woman had appeared before him once more before he could even descend to the ground. It didn't take long for resounding slaps to resound. She bashed him up. Under the gazes of everyone, Elder Tianlong was bashed up by the one-legged woman, and he didn't even have the ability to fight back. Yi Xian's expression became slightly unusual when he witnessed this scene. Because he'd asked the one-legged woman to beat him to death. She was too violent. The one-legged woman was still bashing him up in the distance, and she showed no intention of stopping at all. On the other hand, Elder Tianlong had returned to his original form. However, he was still bashed up after that. The one-legged woman seemed to be weak, but she concealed shockingly formidable strength. Just like that, she bashed him up for an entire hour before Elder Tianlong suddenly said, "Let's leave. Let's leave." However, the one-legged woman didn't stop, and she continued bashing him up like a madman. The Elder Tianlong was finally a little afraid when he saw this scene. Because if he allowed her to continue bashing him up, he would be bashed to death. Elder Tianlong was suddenly blasted away by the one-legged woman. When he stopped and saw that the one-legged woman was about to attack again, he pointed furiously at Yi Xian. "Why don't you dare to attack him when he asked you to kill him?" Yi Xian was speechless. The one-legged woman looked at Elder Tianlong. "Can you compare to him? Don't you know what it means to have a strong second generation?" As soon as she finished speaking, she vanished on the spot. Elder Tianlong's expression changed drastically. At this moment, he couldn't care less about the pride of the dragon clan, and he turned around and ran. When the other heavenly dragons saw this scene, they immediately ran as well. That woman was too powerful, and they couldn't defeat her at all. If they didn't run now, they would be bashed to death. Soon, the heavenly dragons fled the boundless underground city, and the one-legged woman didn't chase after them. Yi Xian glanced at the one-legged woman and didn't speak. He knew that this woman actually did not want to be tainted by karma, because she could have killed those sky dragons, but she did not do so. At this moment, the one-legged woman turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. "I'll leave in 3 days." The one-legged woman turned around and floated away. Inside the pawn shop, Amu suddenly said, "She's very good at fighting." Yi Xian looked at Amu. "Do you know how strong she is?" Amu nodded. "Stronger than you." Yi Xian's face was filled with black lines. "Can you change the analogy?" Amu laughed. "Anyway, he's very strong. You have to work hard." Yi Xian nodded. He indeed had to work hard. As if he had thought of something, he looked outside and said, "Will Heavenly Dragon Race let this matter rest?" Amu shook his head. "They won't let this matter rest." Yi Xian was silent. Amu continued, "What I'm most worried about is that more and more Heavenly Dragon Race will wake up. At that time, the situation will be very serious." Hearing this, the corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. He remembered that Amu had said that there were hundreds of Heavenly Dragon Race. Hundreds of them. What kind of concept was this? Just thinking about it made one's scalp tingle. At this moment, Amu suddenly laughed. "Don't worry, Heavenly Dragon is not the strongest in the Tian clan. In the Tian clan, there is an even stronger clan." The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. "They are in cahoots with the Heavenly Dragon Race, right?" Amu said, "Yes." Yi Xian looked at Amu. "In other words, they might attack me together with the Heavenly Dragon Race, right?" Amu blinked. "It's not possible, it's definitely possible." Yi Xian, at this time, Amu said again, "Your body has just been modified by me, so you still need some time to adapt. Quickly sit down, I'll teach you the Wu clan's secret technique so that you can adapt to your body." Yi Xian nodded. He sat down cross-legged, and very quickly, a message suddenly surged into his mind. Wu clan's secret technique. Outside the boundless underground city, after the heavenly dragons escaped, seeing that the one-legged woman did not chase after them, the heavenly dragons immediately heaved a sigh of relief. They were still a little afraid of the one-legged woman. The heavenly dragon old man slowly closed his eyes. "I never thought that there would be such a strong person in this place. Looks like I still can't underestimate the people of this era." Saying that, he turned his head to look at the entrance of the boundless underground city, his eyes turning sinister. 3 days. We will wait for him here for 3 days. After 3 days, the old man will eat his flesh, drink his blood, and gnaw his bones. Boundless underground city. Somewhere by the river, the one-legged woman sat on the stone steps in silence. At this moment, a woman suddenly appeared beside the one-legged woman. She looked at the river below and said with a smile, "Angry?" The person who spoke was none other than Xiao Dao. The one-legged woman did not say anything. Xiao Dao laughed. "Actually, it might not be a completely bad thing." The one-legged woman turned to look at Xiao Dao. "Then why don't you see him?" Xiao Dao shook his head. "This guy is too good at causing trouble. He actually stewed the heavenly dragon race's dragon. If it was killed, the matter wouldn't be that serious, but he was stewed. I dare say that the heavenly dragon race has never suffered such humiliation before. The heavenly dragon race will definitely not rest until he is dead." The one-legged woman said indifferently, "Those dragons deserve a beating." Xiao Dao laughed. "Do you know the woman beside him?" The one-legged woman said, "It's not simple." Xiao Dao said softly, "It's not just simple, she's the high priest of the Wu clan." In that era, this woman's status was so revered that she was like an emperor in the mortal world. The one-legged woman said, "Why is she following him?" Xiao Dao was silent. The one-legged woman shook her head. "This person is being targeted by too many people." Xiao Dao chuckled. "This woman is very smart, but it's normal. How could someone who can become a high priest be an idiot?" The one-legged woman looked at Xiao Dao. "Is the Tendo still sleeping?" Xiao Dao shook his head. "He's not sleeping." The one-legged woman frowned. "Then what is he doing?" Xiao Dao chuckled. "What do you think?" The one-legged woman shook her head. "It's so boring talking to you." The little Taoist priest laughed. At this moment, the one-legged woman suddenly said, "Does the Tendo dare to kill him?" Xiao Dao chuckled. "Why would I want to kill him?" The one-legged woman looked at Xiao Dao, and Xiao Dao laughed. "Haven't you noticed? Although this fellow is asking for a beating, he's still a good person." The one-legged woman looked at the river in front of her. "What are you planning?" "As far as I know, you don't lack anything." Xiao Dao smiled but did not say anything. The one-legged woman shook her head. "Get lost." Xiao Dao laughed, turned around, and left. In the pawn shop, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. At this moment, the strange red runes on his body appeared again. There was a surge of energy surging around his body. At the side, Amu looked around curiously. Just like that, 2 days later, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes, and there were red runes flowing in his eyes. Amu looked at Yi Xian. "How do you feel?" Yi Xian stood up and took a deep breath. "I feel like my body is full of energy." Amu nodded. "Very good. Now, your physical body is not weaker than a 4-marked sky dragon. If you fight that old man one-on-one, you have a high chance of winning." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "He won't fight me one-on-one." Amu blinked. "That's true. 3 days have passed, are we really going to leave?" Yi Xian said, "If I leave, will you stay here?" Amu quickly shook his head. "You're my wizard servant, I have to follow you." Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, "Let's go, I'll bring you to a place." After saying that, he carried Amu on his back and left. As soon as they left the endless underground city, the Sky Dragon Elder and the other dragons looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian laughed. "Come and chase me." After saying that, he turned around and ran. The Sky Dragon Elder. Chapter 1066. Seeing how arrogant Yi Xian was, the Heavenly Dragon Elder was a little stunned. What did this guy mean? Without much thought, the Heavenly Dragon Elder led the other Heavenly Dragons and chased after him. On the way, Amu, who was on Yi Xian's back, suddenly asked, "Where are you going?" Yi Xian replied, "I'm looking for someone to help me." Amu blinked. "Who are you looking for?" Yi Xian chuckled. "You'll find out soon." With that, he sped up. Behind him, the Heavenly Dragons chased frantically. About an hour later, Yi Xian arrived at a place he had been to before. Ancient battlefield. There were 2 super powerhouses here, Demon Yen and Deity. This place was currently sealed off. However, he still used the Space Dao law to force his way in. Anyway, he was familiar with Demon Yen and Deity. As soon as Yi Xian entered the ancient battlefield, a woman appeared in front of him. It was Demon Yen, whom he had not seen for a long time. Demon Yan's gaze fell on Amu immediately. Looking at Amu, she narrowed her eyes slightly. Amu blinked. Hello. Demon Yen was about to speak when she suddenly looked up. In the distant horizon, a few powerful auras swept over. Demon Yen frowned slightly and looked at Yi Xian. What are you doing? Before Yi Xian could speak, the Heavenly Dragon Elder and the other dragons appeared not far behind them. Seeing this, Yi Xian ran to Demon Yan's side and hugged Demon Yan's arm. Sister, long time no see. I missed you. Demon Garden blinked. Sister? Yi Xian hurriedly said, Sister, I have a gift for you. With that, he took out a pair of horns. Seeing this pair of horns, the Heavenly Dragon Elder's expression instantly turned sinister. Because it was a dragon horn. Yi Xian stuffed the dragon horn into Demon Yan's hand without hesitation. Sister, this is for you. Demon Yan took a look at the dragon horn and a hint of surprise flashed across his eyes. Is this a dragon horn? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Demon Yan sized up the dragon horn and said, even though its quality is ordinary, it's not bad. After saying that, she looked at Yi Xian. You gave this to me because you want the dragons behind you to view me as an enemy, and then you want me to help you fight them, right? Being exposed, Yi Xian's face turned red, but he quickly recovered. He pointed at the Sky Dragon Elder in the distance. Sis, they're bullying us. Demon Yen blinked. Well, I don't think we know each other that well, do we? Isn't it a little inappropriate for you to trick me like this? Yi Xian said, as the saying goes, a day as husband and wife means 100 days of love, Demon Yen suddenly interrupted Yi Xian's words. She looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile that was not a smile, a day as husband and wife means 100 days of love? Don't you think that's a little inappropriate? Yi Xian smiled awkwardly and said, Sis, be my judge. The dragon of the Heavenly Dragon race wanted to kill me, but he wasn't strong enough and was killed by me. Then I stewed him. Tell me, is this my fault? Demon Yen looked at Yi Xian. You stewed a sky dragon? Yi Xian nodded. Demon Yen gave Yi Xian a thumbs up. Amazing. Yi Xian asked, Senior knows about the sky dragon? Demon Yen smiled and said, No doubt a little, he's from the Tian clan. Yi Xian's expression became a little strange. This woman was not simple. She actually knew about the void dimension. At this moment, the Heavenly Dragon Elder suddenly said fiercely, Sir, this is between us and him. Please do not interfere. Demon Yen looked at the Heavenly Dragon Elder. I know it's between you and him. The Heavenly Dragon Elder nodded slightly and was about to make a move when Demon Yen suddenly said, You guys go out and fight. The Heavenly Dragon Elder frowned slightly and looked at Demon Yen. Go out and fight? Demon Yen nodded. This is our territory. This territory is small and can't withstand your torment. So, you guys go out and fight. The Heavenly Dragon Elder looked at Demon Yen. He could not sense the aura of this woman in front of him. She was clearly not an ordinary person. After a moment of silence, the Heavenly Dragon Elder looked at Yi Xian. Let's go out and fight. Yi Xian shook his head. I'm not going out. The Heavenly Dragon Elder looked at Demon Yen. Demon Yen looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Little brother, you can't trick my demon race like this. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Sister, your demon race can't be afraid of the Heavenly Dragon race, right? Demon Yen smiled. Don't try to provoke me. It's useless. Yi Xian fell silent. At this moment, the Heavenly Dragon Elder suddenly said angrily, human. Yi Xian looked at the Heavenly Dragon Elder and said calmly, "Come and hit me." The Heavenly Dragon Elder was furious. A powerful aura suddenly swept out from his body. Yi Xian's expression did not change. He looked at Demon Yen. Although Demon Yen was smiling, his smile was a little cold. When the powerful aura arrived in front of Yi Xian, a mysterious force flashed across the field. Bang! Before Yi Xian could react, the Heavenly Dragon Elder retreated 3 kilometers away. As soon as he stopped, blood sprayed out from all over his body. He was heavily injured with a single strike. Everyone was stunned when they saw this scene. Even the Heavenly Dragon Elder was stunned on the spot. Yi Xian looked at Demon Yen. He was extremely shocked. This woman is so strong. Demon Yen looked at the Heavenly Dragon Elder. I told you. This place is very small, and it can't withstand any trouble. Don't you understand what I said? The Heavenly Dragon Elder stared fixedly at Demon Yen. Sir, this is between my Heavenly Dragon race and him. Demon Yen blinked. I know this is between you and him. Did I say I wanted to interfere? Did I say I wanted to help him? I didn't. As she spoke, she grinned. I told you that this place is very small, and it can't withstand any trouble. I told you not to fight here, but you didn't listen. If you didn't listen, then you didn't give me, Demon Yen, face. Since you don't give me face, then why should I give you face? The Heavenly Dragon Elder's expression turned slightly unsightly. He glanced resentfully at Yi Xian in the distance. This human before him was intentionally provoking him to attack. Demon Yen turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian hurriedly said, I didn't attack. I gave you face. Demon Yen looked at Yi Xian. You're the worst one. Yi Xian was speechless. Demon Yen walked over to Yi Xian and smiled. Our demon race only wants peace now. We don't want to be involved in any disputes, nor do we want to become enemies with any power. We just want to live well. Little brother, do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Demon Yen smiled. When do you leave? Yi Xian hesitated. Then he said, 3 days. Demon Yen nodded. Deal. You can stay here for 3 days. I'll deal with whoever attacks. Yi Xian said sincerely, thank you. Demon Yen turned to look at the Heavenly Dragon Elder. Remember, this place is very small. It can't withstand your troubles. 3 days. The Heavenly Dragon Elder's expression was extremely gloomy. Another 3 days passed. In the distance, Yi Xian left with Amu. After Yi Xian and Amu left, the Heavenly Dragon Elder looked at Demon Yen. Your Excellency, that person is obviously a scoundrel. Why did you give him face? Or are you afraid of something? Demon Yen looked at the Heavenly Dragon Elder and smiled. What about you? Why do you have to pester him for a dead dragon? The Heavenly Dragon Elder said fiercely, he is insulting my Heavenly Dragon race. Demon Yen shook her head. If I were you, I would let him insult me. The Heavenly Dragon Elder frowned. What do you mean? Demon Yen blinked. I don't mean anything. Hee hee. With that, she turned around and left. At this moment, the Heavenly Dragon Elder suddenly said, Your Excellency, who is he? Demon Yen looked at the Heavenly Dragon Elder and smiled. To be honest, don't cause trouble for him. If it's me, I won't provoke him. With that, she turned around and disappeared. On the spot, the Heavenly Dragon Elder frowned. A moment later, the Heavenly Dragon Elder said fiercely, No matter who you are, those who insult my Heavenly Dragon race must die. With that, he disappeared. Yi Xian brought Amu to a mountain range. Amu suddenly said, That woman just now was also very strong. Yi Xian looked at Amu. Does the Wu clan have such an expert? Amu nodded. Yes. Yi Xian asked again, are there many? Amu shook her head, not a lot. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, when will they wake up? Amu shook his head again, I don't know. However, it's going to be soon. Yi Xian sighed softly. Amu looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked around and said, will there be more heavenly dragons waking up in the heavenly dragon race? Amu nodded, I'm not worried about the heavenly dragon race, I'm worried about the Sakya race. Yi Xian frowned, Sakya race? Amu nodded slightly, they are the masters of the heavenly dragon race, they are even stronger. If they wake up, you will be in big trouble. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. Amu suddenly laughed, do you regret stewing that sky dragon? Yi Xian shook his head, I don't regret it. Amu smiled and did not say anything. Yi Xian took out the executing heaven sword. He looked at the executing heaven sword in his hand and said in a deep voice, if only it were a little sharper. Or, it would be fine if that guy used his soul to fight me. Amu said, I can make it sharper. Yi Xian looked at Amu. Amu laughed, really? Yi Xian said, how sharp is it? Amu thought for a moment, then said, how sharp do you want it to be? Yi Xian said, break through their sky dragon's defense. Amu suddenly said, there is only one way, and that is to remodel this sword. Yi Xian frowned slightly, remodel? Amu nodded, this sword of yours is already sharp enough. If you add the legendary Tendo's edge and Mother Earth's sharpness, your sword will become very, very powerful. Not to mention the 4-mark sky dragon, even the body of a 7-mark sky dragon won't be able to defend against it. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, Tendo's edge? Mother Earth's sharpness? What's that? Amu laughed, it's a very powerful thing. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, where can I get this? Amu blinked, I have it. Yi Xian. P.S. These few days, I've been paying attention to the current pneumonia. Everyone, be careful. Safety is the most important. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.